This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
Welcome. Hi, Pat.
Hi.
Sure. If you'd like to take us through your proposal, missing Tim and Michael should have shown, but we'll start without him.
Okay.
I'm taking over for both.
Are you okay?
Should cover for both.
Thank you. Okay, before I begin, I want to just introduce Mike Fletcher, who is our board chair, and I have board members there, Kathy Inhofe, Ruth Bryant, Marianne Harney, and Assistant Director Sue Griffiths. And I don't think anybody else. Okay, good. Okay. So I love handouts. You have your year in review. Just want to go over what the library has been doing this year. Okay. So every year I have to compile a report for the state library, and it's just basically all statistics. Every public library does this report. So what this year in review is going to do is comparing our library to other kind of like libraries. So it's 23 other libraries within the 17,000 to 26,000 population. Okay. So we'll just go through it. First of all, we're going to look at our circulation statistics. So every year, people from North Haven borrow 176,387 books. Well, that's this year. The median towns, the other towns, borrow 161,158. Okay. As far as digital streaming goes, we do about close to 16,000 circulations of e-media, which includes audiobooks, videos, e-books, and this is 9% of our total circulation. Other towns, it's 7.8%, and the statewide average is 5.8%. So people in North Haven seem to like e-resources. If you look at the reference questions answered, we answered last year over 45,000 questions. Other towns, a little bit over 18,000. So we do more than, 2 times as many questions. The programs we offered, both children's and adult programs, we offered 524 programs, other libraries 614 programs, so other towns offered more programs than we did, but our attendance is greater, so 14,850 people attended our programs as opposed to the median towns, 13,126. So it seems like, and the last thing is the library card holders. We are at 43% of people who have library cards in North Haven, where most towns in our population range have 40%. So I'm happy to say it looks like our residents are using our services, our library services. Okay, so now we can go to our pages. So basically, if we go right down to our books, magazines, reference, this is our material budget. That's the one area where I'm asking for an increase of $13,554. And this is basically because of e-resources and audio and visual materials. So we have a big surge in the e-media with a close to 15% increase. We offer a service called Hoopla, and Hoopla is a digital media service, so people can download and stream over half a million titles. And we're finding more and more people are using this service. We get about 10 more people a month who sign up for this service, and they can download up to 5 items. So at most items cost about $3 an item, so we're looking at about $150 more each month that we're going to be spending on Hoopla. Right now we spend about $600 a month on just this service. And I have figures of find before. So when we started this service in 2015, we had an average of people borrowing. There were 36 people. Now we're up to close to 100 people borrowing a month. So last year, 2018, we spent $6,000 on just Hoopla services. So that's my increase in that line. Do you have any questions about that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. The other increase is for Lion, and that is a contract. It reflects both operational fees, and again, we also have another, we have e-resources through that service, and again, we're using more and more, or people are using more and more e-books and e-audio.
Want to take us through your capital?
Sure. And the one capital is for PC replacements. Our replacements, our computer's about 10 years old, so we're looking at replacing the computers in the adult department only this year.
How many computers are you replacing, did you say?
About 15. We get 2 through our consortium. We get 2 a year through the consortium.
These are desktop or laptop or
A desktop.
desktop?
And how are they used?
The public uses them for whatever the public does, searching.
Are they also used for tax preparation? Isn't there some?
People can do tax preparation on them.
Okay.
It would just be like having a computer in your home.
Do you have locks to prevent kids from going to sites that?
We don't. We don't have, the kids have to use the computers in the adult department. They can't use the ones, we have computers in the children's department, but they don't have internet service down there. So it's only in the adult department, and they have to be with a parent to use them.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
Okay.
Ed, the 2 items here, this electrical plug mold strip and the lockers,
Right, you pulled that
can we
out.
just move them to equipment?
Yeah, they're not on
Other-
page 38. The only thing is the computers.
They're only on theirs?
That was my request, but when I
Okay.
received the new one, they're off that.
Okay. Any questions for Pat?
No, you guys do just a great job, and the services, you know, I get the newsletter, there's so much that you guys offer, and other things, I think it's great, you guys do a great job.
I concur.
We all agree.
Yes.
We like our library.
Talk about bang for your buck. It's incredible, and we love the way that you operate as a department in town.
Like I always say, we're the best bargain in town.
Pat,
Yeah.
Ed and I think you do a great job, too.
Oh, thank you.
So I always ask for a building report, though. I mean, in terms of the structure, the roof, the heat, you know, the roof. Yeah, and the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be, knock on wood, it seems to be doing okay right now. You all know what happened in the parking lot, and we're very happy that that's all done. We did get painted, so it looks so much better. We are getting our security system, which is going to be installed in 2 weeks, I believe. We're still looking at lobby lighting. So I'm
Lobby
waiting for-
lighting.
I'm waiting for bids on that. So I think we're getting there.
What security system you speak of?
Just we talked about,
Last year.
last
Recall
year.
it,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
talked about it last
Can
year.
you refresh our memories?
Yeah, just, we have issues in the library, and so this is something, so we'll have cameras around in different areas of the
I see, so
library.
it's throughout the library, not
Right.
just at the front?
Right,
I
correct,
see, okay.
correct.
We're all good?
And- Yeah, so.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
No problem.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thanks.
The spirit of Lois is with us.
Now it would be snowing if Lois were here.
There you go.
That's right, you're right. This is the meeting where it always snows.
That's right, that's right. I break the curse.
This smile. We have our favorite presentation now. You can stay there. You have to get
No,
up.
I'll get it. I'll go with it.
No, we don't want to have to make you.
Ed, light them.
All right, I'll sit right here.
Ed, which page are you on? 38?
Oh, no, okay.
33, sorry, 33.
We need the big one? I still have,
No, I didn't give it.
so it's in this.
Yeah, community service. I just put it right on there.
Ooh, I just
All right, Mr. Spinkowski. Take us through your presentation.
There's no that. It's only people.
You don't have that many lines there, and it doesn't look like you changed much other than personnel. There's a jump in personnel.
How you doing, Pat?
Yeah, well, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
We're doing them on the side. He doesn't have to move for us.
All set?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
If you look at, I didn't present a handout or anything special, but everything's right in the budget and the budget that we've given out. So if you turn to page 33, I'll start with community services. If you want to look at the personnel line, I want you to keep in mind that this isn't a final figure here. It doesn't include two revenue sources. We get some money for the youth service bureau person, and also for a grant that we offset salaries with. So, and additionally, one of the full-time people really only works 3 days. So once we factor all that in, it'll bring it down by, well, it'll bring the total for that department down to 577,833. So it'll end up being a 4% increase, not 14. But I don't have the exact final numbers for the revenue, so they're not in here. But they usually come out about the same every year.
5.77?
No, 577,000 is the total.
833.
What's
That's what I'm looking at right now. That 486 up there is incorrect.
So what's the percent increase?
It'll end up right now to be up at 4%.
Okay.
Give or take a little bit once, depending on the exact revenue number.
Thank you.
Okay? And I just want to, just so you know what community service is all about, we never talk much about the counselors, but I want to tell them that they, I think, done a great job working with BH Care, and they handle a lot of cases throughout the year. This past year, well, right now we have like 210 active clients. In the 18, they brought in 86 new patients, and we're able to discharge 57. So,
If I
because
could
nobody ever really gets to talk about that too much.
Yeah.
But I want to comment and once again commend Ed. Ed, I've often give him a lot of praise for this because he was the one that recommended to me we bring in BH Care. What BH Care has done for us, even though there's a cost, it's helped many people across the town on professional counseling services. BH Care has saved us $25,000 a year because they now have the state license for our counselors, which we don't have to pay for. We're under their umbrella. And we are making very good revenue on this. So Ed, once again, thank you for this recommendation.
Yeah. No, I want to say the revenue has increased, but it's obviously not all about revenue for the counselors. It's about helping people. So, but that is a plus.
Yeah, the programs have, over the last several years, grown and grown and grown with minimal cost impact to the town.
Ed, what's the age range of the clients?
I want to say probably 18 and up. I don't have a
No,
statistical
but
breakdown. But
starting at 18.
yeah.
Next department you'd like to do for us?
If you look on page 34, we'll go over the senior center. But the other items above it, probably nobody else would talk about, but regional health district, visiting nurse, those all are provided, those numbers are provided by those services, so we put those in every year. The senior center, the only increase is basically in the salary line, so that budget is up 3%. Well, than that, everything else is pretty much the same. On page 35, this, again, is going to be a flat number. The only difference is in personnel lines, and that's due to some step increases that we had to give out. So you'll see that it jumped up a little bit. And after that, the only thing left is the capital on page 38. Under community services, the only thing I put in were $20,000 for pool maintenance that we usually put in. And in an effort to eventually replace a bus, I'm putting in $20,000 a year to try to save money to replace the bus eventually. At this point, we have $40,000 set aside.
I was going to say, I thought we had
40.
been setting it aside the
Yeah.
past 2 years. That was my question. Thanks.
It's so critical, because once a bus goes down, it really has a very adverse impact on seniors for medical appointments, and by putting the money in, as Ed's suggesting, it really helps us move a little bit more quickly on replacing the service.
Right, at least I'll have most of the money there.
Yes.
What's a new bus cost?
I want to say 60 to 80 in that range. We usually have funding from the Great New Haven Transit District, and they cover most of the cost, but that's not happening anymore, so we have to fund it ourselves.
We're doing the right way.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get something there.
Yeah.
So there's one bus, right?
No, it's two.
No, I mean, but one that,
Oh, this, we'll just
Yeah.
fund one, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Partial payment.
Any other questions for Ed?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just saying that some members of the public, they'll go and they'll just pick out any salary increases on a bit-by-bit basis. I just want to make sure that this is right here, that the assessor is going to go up approximately 7 or 8% in the current year.
That is because their contract was out for 3 years.
Okay, yeah, I know that's not within what you're speaking
The
about
same
today,
as
but...
library, their salaries aren't all in there because they're in the contractual obligation line.
That money comes out of that line.
And again, I mean, the assessors make
Yeah.
their presentation.
Right, the book...
Once we settle.
Yeah, so the bookkeepers are being changed to part-time, or what you're going from
Which category is
from
that?
2 to 3?
Who are we talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the treasurer, the treasurer's positions
Finance?
in finance.
Page 41.
Is that, you're splitting that up between two people now?
What line are you looking at?
On page 41?
Yeah,
Right.
41.
The bookkeepers,
Yeah. We made one, raised them a level, and lowered the other one. So they went from a 2 to a 3.
oh, okay, it's the same,
Number.
wait. So why?
In other words, we had 2 bookkeeper 2s, now we have 1 bookkeeper 2 and 1 bookkeeper 3.
Yeah. So you're going to 3 bookkeepers?
No,
No,
same number of
no.
bookkeepers, just
increase their-
just change the
rank.
level of the person. Person isn't a bookkeeper 2 any longer. There's a
Michael,
person that's a bookkeeper 3.
look at the salary, Michael, on bookkeeper 2. You see it 99.44?
Oh,
See that?
okay. All right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Last year's salary line for bookkeeper 2 represented two people in that position.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Now it's one person.
Yeah, I'm sorry I got confused with that.
No problem.
And in general, when you go back to what you're one of your prior departments here, the salary line, did it go up 7%? Was that?
Which,
what are you talking about?
Which
Which
person?
one?
That was, what was that? I'm trying to think what page that was.
Is it one of the departments we've already done?
Yes. Yeah, one of the
I mean, community service?
services, rec, senior center.
Well, you mentioned in all of your,
You're not talking about the one he just said, he needs to offset the
in
grants.
every department,
Yeah.
because it was contractual.
In recreation?
No, that was in community service.
sorry.
Recreation, no.
Recreation, page 35.
Is that the byproduct of a couple years of unsettled contracts, or what?
No,
Those are step
there was a step, there were steps in
Step
there.
increases.
It's wages and a step.
Wages and a step.
Yeah.
What do they- They work for the school system? You know we like one or the other. We don't like both. So that, that's a jump.
Look at the breakdown? Or did you look at the breakdown? Where it is?
Sorry, but as I learn on the commercial, see something, say something.
That's fine. Anything else?
That's all. That's all, Ed. Thank you for wearing many, many hats.
Mike, if you want to look at the detail, it's on page 45.
Okay.
Everyone's good with Ed?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we're
Chief,
good
you wanna
with
come
that.
up?
Thank you, Ed. Good job.
Good job,
Keep up the
Ed.
good work.
Ed Christoph from the Mom. Appreciate it. I need about 5 minutes to set
Yeah,
up.
take your time, Paul, take your time, okay? Morning, Pat, how are you? Good.
We're back. Chief, you like to take us through your presentation?
I would like to start by thanking everybody for assembling here again today. Sticking with tradition, it's gonna snow today, as it always does when we do fire department workshops, just a little bit later in the day. So this presentation, I really don't anticipate this going as long as it did last year. I know you're all going to be disappointed. But we, I can get us through this in within an hour. I can stop at various points and allow you to ask questions. I kind of have it segregated into the different areas. It's entirely up to you. I mean, if you have a question, certainly ask. You have copies in front of you of the entire presentation, and you can certainly keep along and make notes, and we can go back and ask whatever questions you may have. So where I like to start it, I like to cover where we are since last workshop. Always try to build on the momentum that we have coming in from last year. What we're seeing since previous workshops, and particularly last workshop, is the EMS billing is, in all honesty, a little under where we anticipated. There's a few outlying reasons for that, some of which we can control, some of which we cannot control. We had projected a revenue of between 200 and 275 on the EMS line. We started billing in November of 2017. So to date, we've collected $54,000. We have $83,000 still outlying that we're working to collect now through a collections agency. So that line continues to build. We continue to work on the various ways we have to assure that we collect that revenue. Trust that we're moving forward with it, that the money is there. There's some outlying reasons, again, that it's not as high as we had thought, but we expect that to change shortly. The billing fees for fire marshal permits, I know this was brought up the other night. I just want to clarify what this is. This is fees associated with building permits only. This is not for inspections. There are inspections that take place during the building process, but these are not your regularly recurring inspections that take place 1 to 4 years, depending on the occupancy type. So we anticipated, we actually have overperformed on this line. 16-17, we had just started billing $148,000. Last year was 1.2 million roughly, and most of that was attributed to Amazon. I have noted here 812,000 of it was related to Amazon. And this year so far, $332,000. I'm going to reference those figures again in a few minutes when we look at a couple of positions. The other thing that we've done since last workshop is our CERT team is well up and running. We have over 40 members trained in the town of North Haven in community emergency response training. They meet on a monthly basis. And if you recall, one of the things that we had approved this last budget workshop was a vehicle for them. And it looks like we're within a couple of weeks now securing a vehicle for that purpose. But if you may recall, you've seen them at the town green over the summertime when the concerts and so forth, and these are a group of volunteers who are giving their time to be part of this CERT team. So the consultants and clerical, you have a request before you for the budget for this year. The consultant line is something that we're already paying. I'm just looking to have it put into the budget so that it's not reflected negatively in my budget. This consultant line is directly tied to the permit fee collection, so it's essentially no cost. Since we began in October 2016, these are the number of inspections that we've done. Over 1,000 inspections, 384 code violations were found. We've had to conduct 3 arrest warrants and 2 search warrants, and the paperwork that goes along with those is quite extensive. 36 abatement orders, and we reviewed 804 permit and plan reviews. Those are all things that we were not doing prior to 2016. So with that comes the consultant, the inspection who's going out and conducting those inspections, as well as the need for a clerical individual to manage the scheduling, the phone calls and so forth that are attributed to every single one of those. So we were able to hire a part-time clerical person this year to begin to manage that workload that we've seen take off. And we're looking to take and move that person from a part-time role to a full-time role. Salary for that is $36,509, inclusive of all benefits is $72,265. Again, even with those two numbers together, we're still not even touching close to what we're collecting in permit fees. Again, this year we've made over $300,000, and that alone doesn't get you there.
How many hours is part-time, Chief?
Part-time right now, by state law, I believe is 19 and a half, 19 hours.
So she's making, or that person's making,
No, that would be if she were to go to full-time, sir. So the idea here is to make that position full-time. She's only there now in the mornings. So it makes it hard when you have people that are calling back, trying to follow up on an inspection, trying to follow up on a code violation, trying to, conduct various different paperwork, and she's only there in the morning to do that. So the idea would be to have her there, mirror the hours that the inspector's there, so that we can keep up with that workload.
So that's the incremental amount, from going from part-time to
No,
full-time?
that's the
No,
total
that's the
amount.
full-time amount,
Yeah.
total amount.
Total amount.
If I can interject just one thing to remind everyone the importance of statute 305 and 350. If this process wasn't being done in such a fashion as Paul and his command staff have overseen, if there was a problem that any of those 384 code violations that the fire department didn't pick up, and there was a liability there, the town of North Haven would have been held responsible, and the tax-paying citizens would be held liable. So I commend the efforts to what the chief is doing here.
And this is being done by an outside consultant.
Correct, yeah. Correct. We're doing this very similar to the building department. The building department pays some individuals as an outside contractor. We're doing the same exact thing. The individual is a licensed or a certified fire marshal, but we have him conducting primarily inspections. We do call him in sometimes for various investigations, but for the most part, his day-to-day activities are the inspections.
so, excuse me for a minute, Chief. You said what did we pull in so far for this year?
332,000.
And how much of that was, is that zoned in one specific area of Amazon? Is it?
No, so the Amazon permits are essentially over. The $332,000 this fiscal year are all the other building projects that are taking place in town at this time.
And that residual from last year?
No, it's new. So it's essentially, we collect a permit fee on any commercial, industrial, or multifamily property. Residential, there are no fees. So your average taxpayer pays nothing when they go to do anything to their home for improvements, because we don't have any authority in single-family homes or two-family homes. It's anything above that.
But Jim, I think what you're asking too is that let's not confuse this. What Paul is saying here, the total revenue he's collecting is covering all of these services. So not only are we getting into compliance with these statutes, but what Paul has done and the fire department has done has collected an aggregate amount of revenue through the permit fee process and the building review process to cover all of these services.
Thank you.
Just going to cover operation lines. There's only two increases to operational lines that are before you. One is for equipment. That's for an increase in the equipment line of $38,000, and I'm kind of going to cover how we got to that number. It's essentially structural firefighting gear. So each set of structural firefighter gear is a total cost of about $3,500. This does not include a radio and an air pack. This is helmet, hood, gloves, jacket, pants, boots, and so forth, harness, that type of thing. So it's $3,500 a set. It has a 10-year lifespan with approximately 45 volunteers, 32 career, that comes to 77 sets. What we've done in the past is we've come before this predates me, the Board of Finance, and have asked for lump sums of money to replace large quantities of equipment, large quantities of gear at one time. We're trying to avoid having to come before you and ask for large capital requests. The intent here would be to incorporate this into the equipment line so that we can buy approximately 8 sets of gear every year, and that's the math that we did to get there. It works out in a few ways. When you're looking at a 10-year lifespan, you also don't want a large quantity of gear all going out of service at the same time. So buying it in increments like this really helps kind of spread it out. So that's the equipment line at a $38,000 increase. The next line increase I have associated with the equipment would be due to the fire hose. So we did something different this past fiscal year. We've always tested the hose internally. Hose needs to be tested on an annual basis. There's particular standards it needs to meet. we'd always done it in-house, and we'd always done the best that we could. Well, in an effort to ensure that we weren't going to take on any liability if any of this hose were to fail and lead to an injury, I hired an outside consultant to come in and conduct hose testing within the entire department. 50 lengths of hose failed. That was a large quantity of hose that we had, and what it did was it put us in an operational deficiency where I had to go out and basically acquire used hose from another fire department so that we can get by this fiscal year. So I'm using used fire hose from the department that they get rid of fire hose every 10 years. Regardless of how frequently it was used or the condition it's in, every 10 years they just get rid of hose. And I knew of the department, and they were able to give us some lengths of hose to get us by. But the last 3 years, this was identified in a 5-year capital plan. It just got kicked up a notch this year because of the independent testing that was done, and we found that it really needs to get replaced now. So the incorporated into the equipment line is another $10,000 to allow us to start purchasing hose, again, the same mindset, on a continued basis, so as not to buy it all at once and have it all perhaps fail at once in the future. We'll buy it in pieces at a time.
Are they all the same length?
They're not, no. So it varies from roughly 50-foot lengths to 100-foot lengths, but then the diameters vary as well. If you're looking at a tack hose, it may be one diameter. If you're looking at hose that you lay into a hydrant, it's something different. So the hose varies. There's also appliances with that as well. So nozzles range from 400 to 900 hours each, depending on the appliance. So when you test hose, you're testing the hose and you're testing the appliances. They all have to meet specific standards.
How old is this used hose that we got? Like, it's okay that it's operational, that we have it, or?
Yeah, so we conducted testing on the hose to ensure that it was serviceable. Again, it was given to us because it had reached 10 years old. They just have an ongoing renewal basis. So it's still operational, and it will be incorporated into the independent testing that will take place this year. I really want to continue with the independent testing. We're able to absorb that cost into our budget this year, and I intend to do it again this year. That way we can release all liability from us and knowing that perhaps we're not testing it the way that we should. Additionally, on operations and vehicle maintenance line, I've asked for an increase of $20,000. This line has not been increased since fiscal year 14-15. We're going to talk about this more shortly, but the average age of our fire engine is 19 and a half years. We have an overall aging fleet, which you heard me discuss briefly with you a couple nights ago. That line maintains 7 engines, 2 ladders, and 4 admin vehicles. And the unique thing with maintenance of fire apparatus is it has to meet specific standards in order for it to remain on the road, which is cited there as NFPA 1911. For capital requests, we're looking to purchase a used ladder truck, and what I'd ask you to do is the next slide is going to kind of tie it together as far as all this apparatus that's being discussed lately. I want to try to have you visualize each different piece of apparatus that we're referring to. During 2018-19, a new ladder truck was purchased. The existing ladder truck is 18 years old, and we placed it into service at Northeast to replace Engine 5. Engine 5 was taken out of service in 2016 because it had failed its annual testing. So from 2016 until the arrival of the new ladder truck, there was only one apparatus operating out of that station. What we're looking at is significant repairs to keep the second ladder truck that we have in service. That's why it was replaced in the first place, was because of those repairs and the cost of them. We're looking to do something unique here, and I'm not looking to set a precedence of buying used apparatus, but I think we have a unique opportunity. We're asking to purchase a used ladder truck, and it's actually cheaper than buying a new engine for them. A new engine would be $400,000 to $600,000, depending on the needs that we identify, and we can actually purchase a used ladder truck for $300,000. Would you mind passing those out? So there's departments all over the country that get rid of apparatus much more frequently than we do, and that's not to take a shot at all to our department or our town. It's just some departments that are all volunteer. They buy trucks on a recurring basis every couple of years, and they really do get rid of apparatus that is in good condition, and it would serve our needs. This truck would be used as a secondary basis. It's a reserve truck. What happens now, our one ladder truck that we have in town, we allow maintenance to kind of build up on it so that when we take it out of service, it's got a number of things that needs to get done in order to take it out. And the reason for that is you don't want your only ladder truck in town to be out of service. I can recall a couple of years ago sending a text message to various chiefs in the area, and of the 4 or 5 towns around us, we had one truck in service to service all those towns. They're maintenance heavy, there's a lot of moving parts on them. So the idea here would be to purchase a used ladder truck so that we have a second truck in town to be able to maintain the current truck that we have on a more frequent recurring basis, and so that when it goes out of service, we have something else we can put in its place that allows the citizens to stay protected with a ladder truck. What I've passed out before you is 2 different samples, if you will, of trucks to justify the budget request of $300,000. They're not necessarily what we would purchase, but there's something to give an idea of what we're looking at. These are trucks that are 10, 15 years old. They still have 10 years of service left in them, and it's something that I think we should consider moving forward. It's the cost-effective way of moving forward.
Chief, how do you get a truck from the Midwest here?
So the idea actually would be try to find something perhaps in the south, which is the same question, but just so that there's less rust and so forth. But you know, there are companies that would put it on a flatbed and deliver it. There's the option of having a dealer drive it to us, or we can send our own staff to go get it as well. When we purchase when we purchase new trucks, they come from Wisconsin, Ohio, and it's a 2-day drive to get here, but they drive them here. So when we're talking all this apparatus, particularly over the last week, I kind of wanted you to visualize what we're looking at. And this is very similar to what was handed out to you the other night, except I added the far right column, which is the replacement plan. So again, this shows you the current status of our engines in town, just our engines, the overall age, the purchase duration, as you've seen the other day, the status for this year in terms of maintenance. You can see a number of them have not been scheduled yet, and that's because we still have that one that's been out since October. But what I have to do is I have to come up with a plan to replace the apparatus that are 25 years and older, and that's what's highlighted. And on the far right side, you can see engine 5 at 25 years old, which is out of service right now. The intent would be to purchase a used ladder truck, which is what you have before you now. Engine 8 is what I discussed with you the other night. It's a 28-year-old engine, and that's what we're trying to obtain a resolution for. And the engine 3 to 32-year-old engine is what I have an outstanding grant application for the second year in a row. One of my tasks is to, as fire chief, is to plan how to replace this aging fleet, and so that's what our plan is at this point in time. I'm hopeful that all 3 of these will happen, and we'll be in great shape for the foreseeable future. Again, just to cover quickly with you the ladder truck, we have multiple 4-story buildings in town. There's more coming. And when you actually stop and think about it, because I have to do it for grant applications, within grant applications, you know how many buildings you have of 4 stories or more, and that number has grown every year in the last 10 years. And you think about what's coming on the horizon, how many more 4-story buildings we're talking about with economic development. The need is even underlined further with the need for a second ladder truck. It's not just the ladder on top that we're referring to when we talk about a ladder truck. It carries ground ladders with it as well that no pumpers in town carry. So your average engine, and this is anywhere, has a ladder that doesn't typically reach any more than 28 feet. Your ladder trucks have ground ladders that go from 35 to 45 feet. So it makes a big difference to us to make sure that ladder truck is available for a couple of reasons, or a ladder truck is available. Not just the ladder you see on top, but the ladders that it carries as well. One added positive to this is that our ISO score, which we're currently sitting at a 3, our ISO score will likely, we have a good chance of dropping that even further with a second truck. ISO likes to come in and see that you have 2 trucks in town. But it's the exact same reason that it shows that you can respond effectively and appropriately and schedule repairs. So ground ladders is probably the first time you've heard somebody talk about ground ladders. This is something to think about. So aerial trucks, again, only apparatus that carry 35 to 45-foot ladders. If you take a look at that building or that house, which we have houses like that all over North Haven, a ladder on an engine is only going to reach the front of that house. So if you try to ladder the window on that driveway side to that second floor window, that's now technically 3 stories. And we don't have a ladder on our engines to reach that window. We would need a 35 or 45-foot ladder, which is why having an aerial truck, having a ladder truck available to be able to have a ground ladder and or a ladder on top of the truck to reach that window is so important. So I try to give you a residential perspective there because it's not just a 4-story building. We have homes in town, mine included, where we wouldn't be able to reach that with a ground ladder we carry on an engine. And typically that's where your bedrooms are. Additionally, within capital improvement plan, there's again a need to replace an administrative vehicle. The intent with that will be to replace a 2011 Crown Victoria. It's a retired police car. It currently has 110,000 miles on it. Something to keep in mind is, you hear me talking a lot about maintenance. When any of our, we have 4 admin vehicles. When any of the 3 admin vehicles that we have right now need to be maintained and need to come out of service for any particular reason, this is what we're putting our staff into. It's a 2011 Crown Victoria. It doesn't have 4-wheel drive. Has 110,000 miles on it. So the intent here would be this would serve as a 4th admin vehicle. It's utilized by 1 of the 3 chiefs in the event that our vehicles go down, and when it's not being used, it's being used by our inspector to conduct inspections. This one is something I really didn't expect to be presenting a need, really, in my career, is ballistic vests for firefighters. If you had asked me a year or 2 ago, I would have told you I wasn't a fan. But things have changed. We do see that we're being asked to respond to incidents now that are much more violent than they have been in the past. We could be asked to respond to incidents outside of North Haven, such as our surrounding towns, where it could be a violent scene. We've encountered that before. But recent events have forced me to have to consider this. And we're looking at 15 ballistic vests and 15 ballistic helmets that would be placed on apparatus selectively within town that our firefighters could wear to protect themselves. We've been involved in incidents, and I don't want to discuss exactly which ones, but we've been in incidents where I've had to put firefighters in harm's way, whether it be somebody knife wielding, whether it be gunfire, whether we look at, one thing we keep talking about is unfortunately the possibility of a school shooting. If my staff have to go into a school shooting scenario and treat students, they're going to look to have a vest on. And that's something that you see actively taking place right now. When you look at any kind of those events, unfortunately, the police are typically securing areas of the building. They know where an assailant is, and the other areas of the building with maybe somebody injured are where you have to go in and start treating people and pulling them out. To do that, we need to be appropriately equipped.
Is this the same equipment that the police department uses?
It's not quite the same, no. The police department is their vests are much more durable, take a higher round, higher velocity round. These are kind of mid-range vests because we don't expect to take any kind of gunfire, but it's one of those things where, God forbid, you're at least protected. And then the helmets, we can't use the helmets we have now because they're not ballistic helmets. They also have bright reflective, striping on it, which is not something you want to be wearing into that kind of environment, unless you want a target on you.
Is that something that might become available through a grant from Homeland Security or something of that sort?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's entirely possible. We haven't looked to do any kind of grants yet with it because it's something that we've really just recently identified, but it's a possibility. Additionally, for capital improvement, there's a $20,000 request for station security. We continue to have some incidents of, we've had 2 incidents of break-ins at firehouses, vandalism taking place, and we're looking to have CCTV monitoring put in place as well as access control systems. I have some keys out there that have been out there for a long period of time, and the way to go about this is to have access control systems installed. The headquarters was outfitted with cameras this past year, thanks to a capital request that was granted this current fiscal year. And we have 3 remaining stations that we hope to bring that same type of monitoring to. Additionally, for capital improvement, there's $60,000 I've asked for a generator for headquarters. The current generator is a 50 kVA generator. It's 22 years old. It was not replaced during the construction project. It's undersized. We've had an electrical contractor come in and identify the needs of headquarters as a 125 kVA generator.
Was it originally part of the budget for
I
the
believe it was.
construction project?
I believe it was.
Yeah. All right.
So the good thing is there's some portions of it, the building that have already been prepped for a generator someday, but we need the generator itself and a new pad, and perhaps it'll be natural gas so that when we have any kind of emergency, the gas is always coming in. You don't have to worry about having fuel deliveries, so that's what we've identified as a need. And then we have 2 remaining stations that will need generators in the future. That's Northeast and West Ridge fire stations, which are identified in a 5-year capital plan as well. Any questions so far?
We're good.
So I'm going to start the transition, I think, into what the meat of this is moving forward. Want to cover with the board again quickly, and this is where we're not going to get into as much detail as we did last year, perhaps. But for the viewing audience that may not have seen last year, I just want to cover our alarms. What is an alarm? So over the last 5 years, we've seen an increase of 12% in our calls. This past year, 2018, the fire department responded to more calls than it ever has before. 4,670 alarms. 62% of those were EMS related, 31% were fire, and 7% were in motor vehicle accidents. As the alarm continued to increase, we're seeing that the simultaneous calls are increasing as well. 26% of our calls are overlapping, they're occurring at the same time. That means we have less staff able to respond to other calls that are occurring in town. So when I say 4670 is the most calls we've ever responded to, 9 years ago we had gotten just about to where we are now, just shy of where we are now. And we sat down with the medical director and we were able to reduce our call volume by 800 calls at that time. So 9 years ago we realized going on 4,500 alarms, 5,000 alarms is beginning to be too much for our current staffing. And that was what we were able to do, was a one-time correction to our calls. And what we cut out were psychiatric calls where the person just needs to be committed to the hospital and there's no harm, there's no injury. We cut out episodes of individuals who are intoxicated, who have no underlying medical issue, and we cut out some of the non-essential calls taking place at the healthcare facilities in town. That accounted for 800 calls, so we were able to buy ourselves some time. But we're at the point now where our call volume is again higher than it's ever been, and there's no further corrections we can take to minimize our calls.
Paul, when you mention a medical director, do you have one on staff?
So Yale New Haven Hospital, there's a physician there, there's a group of physicians, but there's one in particular that we work under that identifies what calls we have to go to as a service provider and which ones we don't. And so any change to that, we have to incorporate that staff so that the town is not held liable for it. You should have gone to this call and you didn't.
Can I just ask a question on the motor vehicle accidents? Has that increased?
No, we haven't really seen it increase. No, it's been 6 to 8%, I'd say, over the last couple of years. I can trend it out for you and see what it's been, but I don't see it increasing yet.
When I get the traffic alerts, there's a lot of stuff that's happening on our stretch of highway, and I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah,
so.
no, we do see a lot. You'll hear me reference the highways in a moment, but I don't think that's any higher than it was, no.
Okay.
So again, just covering quickly what incidents are. Every call, every alarm, they're the same thing, means a fire department apparatus is responding. So it's not an inspection, it's not a phone call, it's not anything like that. It's somebody has called saying they need help. These are not inspections at all. So one call may mean one apparatus is responding, or it may mean as many as 10. It would still be one incident, one call. In 2018, we experienced 35 building fires and 79 fires within buildings. We had 310 motor vehicle accidents, roughly 80% of which included some type of injuries. So where are these incidents occurring? It's about 55% residential. Now, when we say 55% residential, these are zoned residential. So these may still be your senior housing, your apartment complexes. They're still residential. So beyond that, we're seeing a large majority. And the outside special property would be, your highways and your accidents. Healthcare facilities is 16%, and then it breaks down further from there. 5% at our businesses in town and so forth. The types of incidents we respond to hasn't changed at all, ranging anywhere from higher tech level rescues, which are less frequent, to the more common occurrences of car fires and structure fires and gas leaks and that type of thing. So when do calls occur? So this is something I just want to spend a few minutes on, because I know this has come up in the past a little bit. This is a 24-hour spread of every day showing the occurrence of calls. You can see about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, the calls start coming in and they start picking up. They carry right through to about 9 o'clock at night. There is not a distinguishable 8-hour period of time that you can identify as the peak time. It is about a 12 to a 15-hour period of time. Now, what you may see, or what you are seeing, is certainly in the overnight hours, the frequency of calls decreases. What I ask you to think about, because this is a hard data number to capture, is how many times you wake up in the morning and you look at the news and you hear of a fatal accident or a house fire that occurred overnight. So while the frequency of calls is less overnight, the severity of them are actually much more. So the severity of calls is one of those contributing factors to when you need to have the staff available to respond, and enough staff to respond. The days of the week, Monday through Friday, really isn't any busier than Saturdays and Sundays. We're busy 7 days a week for 14, 15 hours a day. Our call volume, again, trending it out. You can see in 2009, it dropped. 2009, 2010, in that area, it dropped down. That was that one-time correction we're referring to. The other drops that you see, the fire department used to respond to car lockouts and things of that sort. And as the fire department has become to prioritize what it responds to, those calls were taken out over the years. So those different drops that you see, that's what it's attributed to. But in the recent last 15, 20 years, the call volume has continued to increase, with the exception of, again, that one-time correction, and we're right back to where we were now.
Sir, could you go back one slide?
Sure.
I'm just trying to read the...
It starts with Sunday, if it's hard to see.
Yeah, no, okay. No, I'm trying to look at the numbers on the left.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll discuss that later.
Okay.
Well, do the types of calls on the weekends change, or is it pretty much the same? Because on the weekends, you probably have more people that are coming in from other towns to go to restaurants, movies, et cetera, or is it pretty much the same mix?
Yeah, I'd have to run that and get that data out there to see. I'm not sure it would change or not. I mean, you're definitely going to have your healthcare facilities that are going to be the more frequent users of calls during the week when their office hours are open. But beyond that, I'm not sure we'd see anything different.
All right, if you could run it, I'd be just interested to
Sure,
see that.
sure. So why are incidents on the rise? A lot of it has to do with the significant economic development the town has seen. It's great. I'm a big supporter of economic development. I don't want that to come across at all as that's not my concern. What I am looking at is economic development is contributing to our increasing calls. We've seen, if you go back to that last slide, we've seen anywhere from a 3% to a 6% increase every year in our call volume. And looking at some of the incidents that we've seen on the rise, this is a contributor reason why. So 197 incidents on the highway this past year. We have 19% of our population is 65 or older, and that is about 5% higher than even the county or the state. Devine Street Medical Center, I want to spend a few minutes on this because I know this comes up in the past, but Devine Street started opening its medical epicenter in 2016, at which point we responded 185 times, 2017 190 times, and most recently this past year 253 times. And if you may not realize that they're currently remodeling the third and fourth floor of that building to bring in more clinical services, more healthcare services than what was there previously, which was IT. Why do we go to Devine Street? Why? And I hear this a lot in town. Why are you going to a medical office building with doctors? And it's really kind of easy to explain. So we don't know what's coming for an ambulance, and this isn't just like this in North Haven. This is like this at least in the state of Connecticut. That physician or that PA needs to stay available in treating other patients who they're attending treatment to. They also cannot legally start to begin treatment once they call 911. Once you call 911 or the person being transported to the hospital, they cannot continue with any kind of life-saving treatment unless they're going to carry through with that patient to the hospital and transfer care. When our paramedics arrive on scene, the paramedics are assuming all care for that patient. It's at their license. If that physician wants to continue to provide care, there's actually paperwork that we carry with us that says, all right, doc, if you're going to continue to care for this patient, you've got to sign here and take complete responsibility for the patient. That never happens. The only time that does happen is every once in a while we'll be on the highway and there'll be an emergency room physician who's treating care, and we know the doc because we transfer care to the doc in the local emergency room, and once maybe every 5 years he'll say, yeah, I've got this. That can't happen in medical care facilities. They typically don't even carry the ACLS, the advanced cardiac drugs, to be able to treat patients. So we're responding to those facilities because we have to. They're a higher acuity call where they have to be transported to the hospital, and therefore that's where we're going. It's certainly attributed to our call volume, and it's certainly something that we've got to stay mindful of. Additionally, there's some other properties in town that, to a much smaller degree, but medical care facilities, 163 Universal Drive, which is the walk-in center there, the medical walk-in center, we've had to respond 15 times. The App Foundation 15 times, and 52 Washington Avenue, which does some higher level medical care as well, 28 responses. So we are responding to medical treatment centers here in town quite frequently. So what happens when we're talking about multiple incidents are occurring? When we're saying overlapping calls, well, it doesn't take much. Highway response alone, I send 2 apparatus to. One to treat the patients, well, they all treat patients, but one vehicle is positioned in such a way that it can be close and start treating patients. The other vehicle positions itself quite far back to allow for that traffic pattern to begin to develop to protect our firefighters operating on scene. But any variation of incidents can contribute to overlapping calls. We're unable to clear a scene and respond somewhere else. If we're on scene and our staff are treating a patient, we can't leave because something else is coming in. We can't stop care. We can only do so until an equal level of care arrives on scene by way of an ambulance, and then we can appropriately transfer over care. And then even at that point, it takes some time to be able to update the staff in terms of what we found and so forth. We don't have the ability to stack calls. So when a fire call comes in, whether it be a medical, whether it be a smell of smoke, smell of gas, anything to that effect, we can't say, okay, we're going to send staff when we have it. We've got to be able to have resources to be able to send to the calls as they're occurring. AMR responds solely to medical incidents. So there are times that AMR will respond when we do not have any fire department units to send. Something to keep in mind with that is we don't know the response times. We also don't know if it's an EMT or a paramedic responding. Typically, if they're responding solo to North Haven, it's because we have multiple calls going on, and they've already sent 1 or 2 or possibly 3 ambulances to North Haven, and now we're looking at more calls occurring. This is one of the things that are concerning for me is when we look at the frequency of calls that are occurring, 15 calls a day, 20 calls a day has become the norm for us. 3, 4, 5 calls occurring at any given time has become the norm. It's no longer, well, that was just a busy hour or two. It's happening more and more. When you start seeing those calls increasing more and more, that now becomes your call volume. That's no longer, that was a busy day. That's your everyday. 30 calls a day would be a busy day. 15 to 20 is a normal day at this point. So for a medical incident, if we have no career staff to respond, again, we're sending AMR alone. If it's a fire incident, we're dispatching the volunteers. Now, I want to make something extremely clear, and you're going to hear me more about this in a minute, is this is not a fault of volunteer firefighters in town whatsoever. They do all that they can to protect the town, and it's unfortunate that sometimes when we talk about this, some of them really do take it personally, because they're personally so vested in the town, and they so want to do more, but it's just time. And it's really just a matter of the data that's showing. We don't know when the volunteers are available. You hear me cover that some more in a minute. We can certainly trend out and see when they're available more so than when they're not. But for a fire incident, if we're all tied up at an incident and a house fire comes in, there's a delayed response for them. They have to respond from their home to the station, from their station to the property. And that alone can take several minutes. So we end up responding to fire incidents with inefficient resources.
Paul, I have a question about
Sure.
the AMR response.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you don't know whether there's an EMT or paramedic on the vehicle. Can't they tell you?
No. Well, we know once they're responding, but we don't know which unit they're going to be able to send. So again, your ambulance's response can be anywhere from New Haven to West Haven to Hamden, coming into North Haven at times. And it's a matter of which ambulance they have available to send. It may have an EMT, it may have a paramedic.
So at what point do you learn what's on the vehicle?
So we learn only upon them signing on for the call, and we see it in our CAD system, our computerized system. We can see that there's been an ambulance responding to the call, but we don't know up until that if it's going to be an EMT or a paramedic. And then that may change. Sometimes there's an ambulance coming, and there's another one they find that's available or that clears, and they think it's closer, and so that can be reassigned very quickly as well.
Thank you.
Chief, one question. The first bullet up there, you mentioned, if I understood you correctly, you send 2 pieces of apparatus to every incident?
To the highway.
To the
Yeah,
highway.
to the highway.
Now, does the police respond at the same time?
The local police does not respond, no. No, the state police responds to the highway. Local police does not typically respond to the highway. They are asked sometimes to shut down a ramp. If we're looking at a scene where we're shutting the highway down, they'll be asked to help shut down ramps, but 95% of the time, local police is not going to the highway.
No, I was thinking of a nice way to save one apparatus from...
Yeah, and really, the idea, the theory behind this too, is that you're putting a large apparatus there to be able to stop an oncoming motorist, whether it be a car or a tractor trailer. So you kind of want your big apparatus up there to stop anybody from getting hurt. And we see that happen a lot. We see, unfortunately, and there's a lot of studies that are being done right now with the lights and what color they are and what pattern they are, because, when you're intoxicated or you're tired driving and you see lights, you're naturally starting to drive towards the lights. And there's a lot of theories out there now of changing different things to keep that from happening. But incidents and accidents are still going to continue to happen.
Jim, when you look at, when you're on the highway and you see the DOT trucks out there, and if there's lawn work being done or tree work, there's probably 6 DOT trucks a mile down the road directing traffic over to the left or to the right or whichever direction. We have 2 apparatus. One is servicing certainly the patients, and the other is a larger apparatus that's on an angle trying to push the traffic over away from our personnel. Unfortunately, we see too frequently when DOT workers are struck and they have such a system and a lineup of trucks, and they're still being struck by drivers who are looking at their cell phones or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So it's a major issue.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the point with that is just to show, and you'll hear me talk more about it in a minute, that it doesn't take much for our career staff to be exhausted of all staff and resources, and the calls are still coming in. So future call volume. So what I've done here is we've seen a typical increase of 3 to 5% already in calls, and we trended out over the years. What I've done here for you is I've identified the properties that we know with some degree of certainty that are coming to North Haven. So that's the address on the left-hand side. What I've done is compared it to like properties in town so that we can begin to anticipate how many calls we're looking at in increase. So 21 Clintonville Road, when it was in its prior use, would respond to that address 140 to 160 times. Amazon, I was able to compare Amazon to Medtronics because it has a fair number of the employees. Medtronics, last I looked, had about 1,500 to 1,700 employees. So that's how we're able to make that comparison of another like property. Bradley Homes, which are discussed and so far they're not yet through a site plan process, but they've been approved, is I've compared it to Carmen Romano, which has half the number of occupancies, half the number of apartments. We go to Carmen Romano roughly 90 times to 100 times right now. So when you double the number of beds, number of apartments, you're looking at 180 to 200 more calls a year. There's been some discussion of a new hotel, which is great. We go to Best Western, which is a similar property, 25 to 35 times. Temple Pines, the existing building right now in Temple Pines, same thing, 25 to 35, and there's plans to build another building next to that. 445 Washington Avenue, some apartments, and as well as apartments at Fantasia, should they occur, compared to another apartment complexes there. So when you look at all of this, just with these properties alone, we're looking at 460 to 560 more responses as these properties begin to become occupied and used. So, well, may not all happen this year. I think we can say that over the next 2 years, these properties will be up and running and occupied. So we're looking at not only our typical call increase at 3 to 5%, but when we just look at this alone, we're projecting that by the end of 2020, we'll be at 5,300 incidents. Your current staffing model that you have is 8 firefighters on duty, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mentioned the second bullet point of the minimum staffing required is 7 on duty since 1996, only because there's been some discussion of the work schedule and changing the work schedule and so forth. Right now, we have to have at minimum 7 firefighters on duty. That was a ruling by the state of Connecticut in 1996. That was prior to us responding with paramedics. That was 1996 call volume, and that was when we had over 100 volunteer firefighters in town. So currently you have 8 firefighters around the clock. What we know is anything is predictable is preventable. So I can predict the fact that the call volume is going to go up, and I'm having difficulty responding to multiple overlapping incidents, which only results in the inability to provide the appropriate resources and apparatus. The other thing that we're aware of is that the apparatus is overall aging, which we have a plan, as I have shown you, to work to improve that. Our staffing levels, reflected as through the end of 2018. Our overall volunteers, I showed this slide last year as well, continues to decline, and our career staff has essentially stayed the same. We did just add 2 positions which are not reflected in this, which will be by the time we show this slide again. We continue to recruit and retain volunteers the best that we can. We participate in national and Connecticut recruitment drives. The Connecticut Everyday Hero is one that we participated in the past. Multiple years in a row. Our volunteer strength currently sits at 13 qualified interior firefighters at West Ridge on the west side of town with 1 probationary member. Probationary members are individuals who are within roughly 6 months to a year of being a volunteer. They're going through the various classes and so forth they need in order to become interior qualified. Some will advance, some won't. We have 11 at Montauk East and 15 at Northeast. So it brings our roster to a total of 46, with 40 of those individuals being qualified. At one time in this town, we had a waiting list, and there were 105 volunteers. We continue to improve infrastructure and apparatus. The training center that we're talking about behind Northeast Firehouse is going to help with retainment of volunteers. There's banners at each firehouse location. They might be down right now for the wintertime because they get beat up along the roads, but they'll be back up for spring for sure. We set up a recruitment hotline, which is advertised and monitored, and with that, we have individuals who call to inquire about becoming a volunteer, and I put them directly in touch with volunteer firefighters that have helped take over recruitment for me. I think there's a lot of value in somebody who's inquiring about being a volunteer talking to an existing volunteer.
What percentage of the volunteers go on to the professional ranks?
That's a great question. We've seen a high number of them, and it seems to kind of come in waves. We seem to have about, I'd say, 2 to 3 volunteers a year go on to become professional firefighters in surrounding
North
towns.
Haven? Oh.
No, not within North Haven necessarily, no. But certainly with surrounding towns,
Thanks.
which is good. You know, it tells us that we're training them and they're getting the opportunity they want here as a volunteer, and they've decided to make a career of it. One of the things that we've set up in recent fiscal years was the gym memberships for the volunteers as well, which we're making good use of. And something you're going to hear more about shortly is we're looking at increasing their tax abatements. They currently get up to $1,000 in tax abatements if they're able to achieve a certain call volume and attendance to drills. And there's some incentive to increase that. We have to work through some different avenues in order to make that happen. But we hope that will continue to recruit and retain volunteers. This isn't a problem unique to North Haven in any means, the volunteer firefighters. I pulled up these 3 articles just from this past year, local articles. Channel 8, New Haven Register, and Channel 3, all conducting different stories of volunteer firefighters in the state of Connecticut being on the decline. What you have happening is you've got people that are working 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. You've got dual-income families. Our kids are busier than ever. I know that firsthand. Every night there's things going on with the kids and so forth. It's becoming harder and harder to ask people to put aside essentially 1 night a week and come and conduct drill and training, in addition to the initial training, which is much more of a time commitment, and then to be able to just drop at a moment's notice and respond to calls at all times of day and night. You'll hear some reference to NFPA 1710, which calls for 4 firefighters to arrive on scene within 5 minutes, 90% of the time. That's a standard that we're held accountable to, and that we have to demonstrate that we're trying to achieve. So with that same standard is 14 to 15 firefighters to arrive on scene in what they call a full alarm assignment within 9 minutes, 90% of the time. And that's 14 to 15 firefighters for a single family residence. So how do we get to that 14 to 15 firefighters? Because it sounds like a lot. And remember that if all of that career apparatus are available, we're responding with 8. So we've got to make up that difference. So I've never shown this before, and it might be easier for you to look in your handouts. I'm not sure it's going to be any easier to look at, but this is how we separate the 15 different firefighters on scene. Is you have your initial engine with an attack line and your pump operator on the left-hand side. You have 2 firefighters that have to go to the roof or do some type of vent. You have 2 firefighters that are searching the house to see if any occupants are inside. You have 1 person who's operating that truck at the bottom to make sure that the ladder is supportive of the firefighters operating from it. You have a second attack line because what we know about fire is it spreads everywhere within a home, so you've got a second line going in. And then you have 2 people that are standing outside to make sure that if anybody goes down in the house, we can go in and get them. And then you have your incident commander, who's got to be able to have the eyes and ears on the entire scene and make sure that everything's being done safely and call for resources as needed. So that's how we come up with the 15 firefighters within 8 minutes, 9 minutes of a scene. It's not a wish list. It's the standard of what we have to achieve. And for a long time, we've been able to achieve that in this town. For up until a few years ago, we've been able to achieve that. We've had 2 engines in each volunteer station, and they would typically both get out with a full complement of personnel, 4 to 6 personnel. So they go from 8 career firefighters and they get to that 15 number. Really, it wasn't hard to do because you had enough volunteers coming. You're able to make up that difference. Well, what we're finding is that's not happening anymore. The volunteer firefighters are on the decline. Again, no fault of their own, not unique problem to North Haven by any stretch. We call in another engine from a surrounding town to help make up that difference. But again, that's assuming that all 8 of our career firefighters are even available to respond. If we have an apparatus or 2 out, because again, we have those simultaneous calls going, we've got a big number we've got to make up in those first few minutes. So mutual aid, in 2015, when I became chief, we started to work extensively with mutual aid partners. Policies were developed that would call in mutual aid upon any report of a possible structure fire, a verified structure fire, I should say. Possible isn't necessarily true. Anything that we confirm is a working structure fire. We'll right away call in a surrounding town for at least one engine to respond. It's imperative that we know as firefighters that we have a second engine that's responding, because as you saw to that last slide, we need to know that we have enough firefighters there, enough hose going in to combat the fire. Our average response for our volunteers per station, remember there's 3 stations, during the daytime hours we see 0 to 2 available. Half the time they're not able to respond at all. In the evening hours it's much better, 4 to 10 available in the evening hours, and in the overnight you're looking at about 4 to 8 firefighters available per station. Now when you're looking at, go back to that total number of firefighters in each station, you can see how these numbers, this is where we're at. They're not all going to be available at one time. With mutual aid, we have to give some consideration to reciprocation. We're asking for the towns to come in and help us combat fire at times. We need to be able to reciprocate ourselves. The way that works currently, if it's a response to the scene, we send our career engine to the scene of another town. And then we put all of our volunteers on standby and hope that we can assemble another engine to respond.
How do these CERT volunteers interact with that?
So, and that's another great question, is the CERT needs to be activated. So the emergency management director in town needs to activate CERT to respond. The reason for that is the town of North Haven doesn't take on any risk through liability or workers' comp or anything to that effect when you use CERT, but they have to be activated. And CERT members are going to provide support functions only. They're going to provide perhaps shelter for people that we may have pulled out of a home. They're going to provide rehab maybe to the firefighters on scene. But you look at, for example, the town of Hamden has a very, very positive and performing CERT team. They only respond to 1 to 2 incidents a year in the town of Hamden. So the CERT team is not something you're typically calling out for your regular fires. This past year we called a CERT team out on 2 occasions. For the tornado that came through, so we can open a shelter, and for the incident on Quinnipiac Avenue, so that we can, as we were evacuating neighbors on Quinnipiac Avenue, they had somebody they can go to and seek some care from. But CERT is more your disaster-oriented response.
And Jim, they're not trained as volunteer firefighters, so they haven't received the training whatsoever, whether it would be Fire One and they don't train as a firefighter.
Yeah.
So EMS response, why does a fire department respond to EMS calls? Well, your firefighters are cross-trained. Every firefighter in the department is at least an EMT, and a number of them are paramedics as well. Your firefighters have a closer proximity to your incidents. Again, we don't know necessarily where the ambulance is responding from all the time. So the firefighters are typically going to be, if not in a station in town, and have a closer proximity to the incidents. The other thing that I don't think people give a lot of value to is the fact that your firefighters that are treating individuals during EMS incidents, they're employees of the town. They have a vested interest in the well-being of the taxpayers and visitors to the town. And that transcends into giving that much better of care. Our ambulance response, again, as we covered already, we don't know what's responding, an EMT or a paramedic. In the ambulance arrival time, I don't want to get too much into the PSA discussions that are taking place, although I will inform the board that as of this past week, we finally filed for the PSA with the state of Connecticut. I know we've been talking about that for a long period of time. There's been a lot of prep work in order to get to that point so that we feel confident in our pursuit of it. But I can tell you that there was a meeting that took place leading up to the filing of the PSA in which ambulance executives were insisting that they couldn't put anything in writing that would guarantee the ambulance to arrive on scene within 10 minutes. And I can welcome to talk to anybody offline about that exact conversation and who was present for it, but that was a discussion. they're confident that they can't put anything in writing that says the ambulance will get there in 10 minutes. And a town attorney was present to hear this conversation. So we're looking at, well, AMR will respond. All right, well, how long is that going to take? So we really want to make sure that the firefighters are able to respond to the EMS incidents as they're occurring, to be able to provide that initial life-saving care and treatment so that when somebody calls 911, they're not just waiting for an ambulance to arrive. Their firefighters are available to begin treatment.
Is that a priority issue with them? They have to establish
No, it's their business practice.
their business
It's
practice?
contracts that take place everywhere.
Want to make sure the first selectman's listening to this.
Well, as
I
the
don't-
chief knows, I've been the biggest supporter for filing for the PSA, so.
I don't quite get it. They can't assure you a shorter than 10-minute period.
They don't want to put anything in writing.
Do they show up sometimes in less than 10 minutes?
Sometimes, and I wouldn't even want to say how many times. You know, part of this is if this was the first call taking place, I'm sure you can have anybody that would say, all right, we'll get an ambulance there in the first call. But as we've seen, you're not talking about just one call taking place. You're talking
So-
about multiple calls taking place.
So it is a priority issue, a competing call.
In that aspect, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
The fire department, on average, responds in 2018 to all EMS incidents within 6 minutes and 16 seconds. We have firefighters on scene at least being able to treat the patient. You know, I've heard some discussion over the last year that perhaps the fire department should just stop responding to EMS incidents. Well, no fire department's gone backwards. Every fire department around us responds to EMS incidents. I don't see anybody saying we're going to stop going. So what we did in 2009 was we took that to the next level. We added a step where we went to the ALS and we went to the paramedic level.
And by the way, we were the last town in the surrounding towns and cities to, in fact, provide that level of service in 2009.
So the fire department medical response, again, headquarters responds with a paramedic operating at one time. Again, multiple times each day. All three apparatus out of headquarters are responding to separate medical incidents, and we still have that need for a fire response. We've got the same personnel who are responding to the medical incidents in town, are the same personnel you're calling upon to respond to a fire when it occurs. And they can't drop what they're doing with a medical patient and respond to a fire. There needs to be a systematic way of transferring care. So on average, we're not able to respond to 1 to 2 incidents per week during 2018.
1 to 2 medical incidents per week.
These were medical incidents, right. Now, the fire incidents, what happens is there's a significant delay in the response. If the career staff isn't available and the volunteers are dispatched when career staff isn't available. Let me make that abundantly clear. But there's going to be that delayed response. When you look at their staffing levels, their availability at different times of the day, it becomes concerning knowing that we're relying on just a volunteer engine to respond and there's nobody else that able to go at that point because everybody else is tied up. So again, how do we get there? What are our typical responses? Right now, the fire department is staffed with one engine, and I'm going to have another picture of that shortly to kind of make that clear. But your typical accident on the highway, as we talked about, is going to be 2 apparatus. Assuming there's no other calls taking place, it'll be the rescue and the engine, the rescue with the paramedic on it and the engine. Again, we're responding to the highway 15 to 25 times a month. But when these things occur, and this is just an example of one call occurring that can take up 2 of your 3 apparatus, it leaves you with the truck available at headquarters with 2 firefighters remaining for all remaining EMS and fire incidents. And when that is dispatched is when we're really hard pressed for staffing beyond that. Recent examples. I kind of like to do this to give you some idea. So I start working in this workshop about 3 to 4 weeks before it. And in doing so, as I'm sitting there usually working on it, a little bit each day, I take note of some different things and different occurrences where I think it's worth passing it on. So an example will be Saturday, December 29th at 5:44. There was an accident on the highway in which The engine of rescue and 2 volunteer engines were dispatched to for a pedestrian struck. At 6 o'clock, a separate motor vehicle accident was on the highway. Engine 8 and truck 1 responded to that. At 6:10, a possible structure fire came in on Maple Avenue. Engine 4, Engine 7, and truck 2 were dispatched. Engine 4, all those being volunteers, only Engine 4 was able to respond. Both apparatus out of Northeast did not assemble a response. And this is on a Saturday at 6:10 at night for a reported house fire. On Friday, January 11th, a weekday, you can see various calls taking place. 11:49, the rescue goes to an incident. 12:08, the engine's going. 12:31, a truck's going. Meanwhile, the rescue is still tied up on a call. The engine's still tied up on a call, so the truck's now going to a call. And at 12:38, there were no longer any fire units available to respond for a 4th call that was occurring on Divine Street. On Wednesday, January 6th, 7:06 in the morning, possible structure fire on Beach Lane. 2 volunteer engines, 2 and 6, responded with the 3 headquarters apparatus, which are Engine 1, Truck 1, and Rescue 1. At 7:20, there were no units available for a motor vehicle accident that occurred on Green Hill and Bishop. And at 7:23, an accident came in at Middletown and Half Mile. And at that time, we were able to clear the rescue from the possible house fire, as it turned out to be nothing that needed to stay there for. That had a delayed response responding to that next motor vehicle accident. So this is how fast we run out of resources. These are examples of calls that are occurring on a regular routine basis and how fast the resources that you have are exhausted.
Well, out of curiosity, was there a fire on Beach Lane? You had 3 engines, a ladder truck, and the rescue truck.
No, but it was reported as a fire, you send the resources needed just in case it is.
Do you send the rescue truck
Yeah, correct.
automatically?
Yes.
No, you don't wait just to assess?
No, not a report of a fire, no. No, only because we need to make sure we have, again, look at that 14 to 15 firefighters need on scene. You want to make sure that they're going. You can always turn them around if you don't need them. but you wanna
Right,
make
so
sure
once that
they're
rescue
dispatched.
truck got there in 8 minutes or whatever.
6 minutes, so it's there at
6 minutes,
7:12,
so that
7:13.
rescue vehicle was able to respond to those motor vehicle incidents?
Was not able to respond to the one at 7:20, was able to take in the one at 7:23, but again, it was delayed. They had to take their air packs off, put it back in the truck, get going again, right.
Okay, I mean, I'm doing the math like him, 7:06 plus
Right.
10 minutes, 7:16. The call came in at 7:20, and Rescue 1 still have to stay with the
Well,
at the house?
7:06, when a call comes in, you get to Beach Lane alone, it's a 10-minute drive.
Yeah.
Then they'll be able to figure out what's going on. I mean, it's not, you're
Okay.
talking minutes here.
All right, no,
Yeah.
that's all right. I'm just trying to figure out how,
Sure.
that Rescue 1 that was sent there, whether that always should occur.
For a report of any kind of a house fire, yeah. And
Yeah.
think of it this way as well. If there's people trapped inside or we're pulling people out, the rescue now is no longer operating as a fire department vehicle. It's treating the people we just pulled out so that the engine and truck staff can continue to go in and fight the fire.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if that was part of a form of EMD, where the dispatcher tries to assess the situation.
No, not in that case.
That was a false alarm?
No, it was not a false alarm. It was a furnace malfunctioning that caused smoke throughout the house and elevated levels of carbon monoxide. So your proposal that you have before you is to increase staff by 6 firefighters this fiscal year. We were able to add 2 firefighters this fiscal year based on result of the workshop that was put together. Leaves us with the balance of 6 firefighters to be able to make an immediate impact on the operations of the fire department. I just want to underline that. It's 6 more firefighters, which brings us to a total of 8 instead of a 2-year period, allows us to make an immediate impact. It's going to decrease our dependency on mutual aid. It's going to allow us to respond to additional incidents as they are occurring, the overlapping incidents. It's going to allow us to easier provide mutual aid reciprocity so that we're able to send an engine out and not be at necessarily a deficit to the North Haven taxpayers. The intent with that would be to staff that engine at the Monterey Station, which is our furthest travel distance in many regards, the exceptions of a couple of streets up on the far west side of town. But for the frequency of calls that are occurring in the Monterey area and a number of residents that are living there, that engine would be there to service that particular section of town and any other areas of town as needed.
Chief, hypothetically speaking, let's say your wish list was satisfied.
Sure.
You got all the staffing you needed for the additional 6 and even the additional 8 you're looking down the road. Would there be a need for pursuing any volunteers out there?
Absolutely.
Why? Why would you say that? Your staffing would be 60, 70 people.
Because you're still looking at needing those 14 to 15 firefighters on scene. That's assuming that they're all available to respond, and then that's just for a single-family home. That's not for fires that are in manufacturing businesses and commercial buildings and schools and things of that. So I have absolutely no question that there is always going to be need for volunteer firefighters in this town, always. You certainly need it, especially when you look at times of crisis, when you have a storm coming through and you're looking to, a blizzard and things like that. I mean, so there's always going to be volunteers. There's no question.
Okay.
Yep, you'd always need it. So how does a town accomplish this? There's a few options we have moving forward. We can continue to hire 2 firefighters each year, as we've agreed to do this past year, and we can build that number up over time at a structured and planned out cost to the taxpayers each year. We can hire 6 this fiscal year, which again allows all 4 shifts to have an immediate impact on staffing and response. And then another option we can look at doing is pursuing a FEMA SAFER grant, which is something we took advantage of in 2009, and we can continue to look at possibly doing that, and we can have further discussions on what that would look like. So again, to kind of make it clear what we're able to provide right now. This is the way that 8 personnel are assigned. Those are the 3 apparatus out of headquarters. They might not be the exact apparatus. They may have changed a little bit since that picture was taken, but they're the same 3 apparatus nonetheless out of headquarters. That's where 8 firefighters are responding from. That's the apparatus they're able to respond with. You have 1 paramedic and you have 1 engine. The red apparatus in the middle is the only thing there that carries water. During 2018, with a 30.53 mill rate, the average household in North Haven paid $6,411 in taxes, not including motor vehicle and sewer tax. Of that, they paid $269 for their fire department, $22 a month, what the average taxpayer in North Haven is paying for the fire department. That same staffing that you see, the same number of apparatus that you see, is the same number of apparatus we've been running since 1974. The proposal before you to consider, again, depending on which way we go about it, would be to hire an additional 6 firefighters, which would bring our shifts to a 10-person shift, 10-man minimum. You'd have 2 paramedics operational. The engine down at Mono East that you see pictured there would be staffed. Again, maybe not that exact engine, but an engine at Mono East would be staffed, and it would have a paramedic on it. So that would bring us to a total of 2 engines that we're able to staff and respond with, which again are 2 apparatus with water, able to respond to fires. And that would be at a cost of $58 a year, of $4.83 more a month than you're paying right now. Right now, the fire department is the 4th largest department in town, behind Board of Ed, the Police Department, and Public Works. Even with this addition, we'd still be the 4th largest in town. So what this would do, it would dramatically reduce the need for mutual aid. It would significantly reduce EMS and fire response to the south side of town. When you look at our response times to that side of town, which I'll cover more in a moment, having an engine on that side of town for those taxpayers who live on that side of town would be a tremendous benefit, both in terms of responding to EMS incidents where moments and minutes matter, and responding to fires where the same thing occurs. Again, taking a response time from headquarters, which is the letter A on that map, to a town-owned property, On Brockett Farm Road, it is a 4.9 mile and a 12-minute driving time. So by situating an engine on the Monterey side of town, you would drastically reduce response times to the south side of town. In my opinion, that addresses the immediate needs of staffing with the department. You've heard some conversation last year about pursuing a grant and 16 firefighters, and I kind of just want to take a moment to show you what that would look like. So in the future, this is how I would see things. The longer-term plans would be the next couple of slides. The assumptions are this: the call volumes continue to rise, economic growth continues, and the volunteer firefighters remain at their current staffing. So in the future, we're looking at, I would anticipate 11 to 12 firefighters per shift. The nice thing about this would allow me to take the officer. So something to keep in mind, look at that picture, is the individual who's responsible for the entire shift, 7 days a week, all hours of the day, rides in the front seat of that engine, that red engine. He's my eyes and ears for the entire shift. He's deciding, do I need to call a chief officer? Do I need to call another help? Do I need more staff? Do I need to dispatch more companies? He's the one who's doing it all on an ongoing basis. The problem is he's obligated to wherever that engine is. So that red engine may be somewhere where I don't necessarily need him to be, but he's stuck there, and he may need to be going to another scene to manage it for me to tell me what else is going on. So the idea here would be to put that officer in a mobile command vehicle where he can respond to the calls and prioritize the scenes and dispatch resources, and more importantly, free up resources. And you look at that call where you had a possible structure fire and you had all those resources dispatched. Well, if he arrived on scene and says, hey, I don't have a working fire, I've got something, but I don't need necessarily all these apparatus coming, he could have very quickly turned units around and put them back in service. That's exactly what our surrounding towns do and comparable towns do. The towns of Wallingford, East Haven, Southington, Westport, Hamden, and Brantford all have their shift commanders in a car, mobile, able to respond to the scenes as they are needed, as they're occurring, able to prioritize. That's the future of the department. Rather than having a one individual who has to make all those decisions tied to wherever that apparatus is. The nice thing when you start looking at this is not only can we then put our officer in a car and responding to the scenes as needed, but you can have a third paramedic on shift. So we go from a current day of 1 to 3. The proposal for this, depending if it were to be 11 to 12 firefighters per shift, would be anywhere from $87 to $116 more per year, or $7.25 or $9.66 more a month than you're paying today. So that's where I see the future of the department.
When you think about previous meetings that we've all attended, both certainly in front of your committee, as well as the Board of Selectmen and our Fire Commission, residents of this town have requested additional paramedics on duty. I think being able to provide an opportunity to have 3 paramedics, I think would fulfill the request of our residents to be sure that they're receiving the quality customer care and professional care at the time of need. The message is clear from our residents. They want additional paramedics in order to perform the duties. And I think that it's very difficult for us, if not impossible for us at this point, with the personnel that we currently have, without adding additional staff in order to accomplish that goal. And if it means that we need to go down the road as far as a federal grant is concerned, I think that's something that we need to seriously consider. Granted, we receive some discount for the first 3 years or 2 years, whatever it happens to be, and then we totally own it after that. We absolutely understand that. I spoke about cost and benefit in the past, and I think our residents are looking at the benefit of the services that the department is providing. And the question is whether or not the residents are going to be willing to underwrite that cost. I think the chief has broken it down to on an annual and a monthly basis. Most of us pay our mortgages on a monthly basis, and we know what the increase is or could be. And hopefully, as we move forward in the future, we could come to that conclusion. So I believe the message is loud and clear from our residents as to what they're looking for.
I agree with that, but I think your challenge is while they want it, you have a population that says that they can't afford it. That's where the problem is. The first time somebody calls and it's medical and it takes 6 minutes, that person's gonna be, yep, I'm supporting it, but you've got that challenge with people that are retired on fixed income, so that's really the struggle in all of this.
Believe me, I understand that completely personally. Many of us are in that situation. But I guess, I use the TJ Maxx slogan all the time, the max for the minimum.
Well, you're right. That is the challenge, and that's what I hear people say. That first time they experience to have to call 911 and it's medical, and you're looking at your watch going, it's 2 minutes, and you're, whatever the scene is, people are freaking out that there's not a response. That's gonna change their opinion, and then they're gonna have to say, well, I'm gonna have to, whatever they do to their household budget, but that's really the challenge in all of this.
Sure.
People want it and they can't afford it, and when you experience it, it's personal to you, and now it's like, okay, I'm gonna make adjustments.
You're absolutely right.
Sure. Well, hopefully, in our form of government, certainly as a town meeting form of government, I believe the residents will have to speak.
Right.
And it'll be up to them as to whether or not they want to incur the additional cost.
I mean, that is a 50% increase in your staff per shift.
It is.
You know,
And this is,
throw some equipment in it, you're looking at a mill.
it's something where the last thing I want to happen is a tragedy to occur, and for anybody to say, Chief, you never told us it was this bad. If you had told us, we would have done something about it. And that's all I'm trying to keep from happening. I don't want to wait for a tragedy to occur. I'm trying to clearly identify what the needs are, what the risk is, the associated risk to it, and have this board and perhaps the public make a decision. That way there, God forbid that tragedy does occur, I can at least say that I did my part. And that's what you've tasked me with. That's what my job is. Almost done.
Almost done?
Yep.
Square up, we'll ask some questions, and we can move along.
Sounds good. So as another visual to what's been proposed, again, the left-hand side are the goals for the department. So 2 medics, 3 paramedics, a mobile shift commander, further in compliance with NFPA 1710 with a number of firefighters on scene, 2 staffed engines, one of them being at the Monowee station, and then perhaps a future overtime savings. You can see on the top, 6 firefighters allows you to have 2 active paramedics, 2 staffed engines, and a Monowee station staffed. 10 additional firefighters, again, moving into the future, allows you to have 3 active paramedics and a mobile shift commander. And now we start closing that gap on how many firefighters you have to have on scene overall, and because you're able to start adding more. And then with the 14, which was identified quickly in the last slide, now you're looking at a future overtime savings because you're staffing more than you're running as a minimum. You're staffing your shifts at 12, you're running down to 11, so there's future overtime savings there. Why more staffing now? It's the fact that we can't do more with less. We hear that a lot in private industry. That doesn't work in a fire department. We can't do more with less. We need to have the resources able to respond. Our volunteer availability is limited. A number of incidents are on the rise. The economic development has continued to have an impact on particularly the fire department. We have limited FCBAs, which are the air packs, limited personnel, and then there's a physical exhaustion. I mean, it's a very troubling scene for me when I'm running a fire scene and I'm looking at what needs to get done, and I look behind me and there's nobody to do it. There's no staff to do it. Maybe the staff hasn't even signed on yet, and I'm looking at 8 firefighters or 12 firefighters inside that are putting their lives on the line, and there's nobody even out in the front line to go get them if I need people to go get them. And then their bottles are good for 20 minutes or a half an hour, depending on the level of breathing. And I've got one more bottle I can put them in after that, but they're physically exhausted. So it's not a safe environment to be running with just this number of firefighters and having the frequency of calls that we do. If we were to continue to go down this road with the level of increase of staffing that we have, we're going to have to eventually consider perhaps defensive operations, meaning we're not going to go into a fire until we have enough resources on scene, or until we have an engine on scene. If there's no engine there, there's nothing to put out. We don't have the hose to put it out. So we're going to have to look at, as calls continue to grow, perhaps changing what we're doing. You know, I want to cover this quickly, and I think this has some merit. You know, the history of staffing, you know, it's been a little troubling over the last year because, as you may have heard at one of my fire commission meetings, I've been accused of trying to build up the department unnecessarily, trying to, you know, these crazy ideas of increasing staffing and so forth. And you know, it troubles me only because it's not making my job any easier. It's just for the citizens of the town. And something that it's worth paying attention to, that in 1972, there was a consultant hired, Warren Young Kimball, who went on to become a world-renowned author in the fire service, conducted a staffing study for the town. In 1972, said there should be 12 firefighters on duty, 10 on duty at all times, 2 engines and a ladder. This predates EMS. So in 1987, if you could pass that out, Chief O'Beer provided a 10-year plan to grow the fire department to 77 positions by 1997. The interesting thing with this, I'd never seen this document before. I only knew that it existed. Well, in conversations leading up to this week, I talked to a lot of my staff about this workshop, and I happened to mention to one of Chief O'Beer's sons who still works with the department. I says, you know, I'm actually going to be mentioning your father. And he says, I just came across that document the other day, and I just saw this yesterday for the first time. And I just thought it's worth pointing out to you that I'm not losing my mind here. These aren't crazy ideas that I have. These were forecasted back in 1987 to grow the department to a 77 career staff. And this is a letter to First Selectman Walter Galbraith at the time for how that was going to be done. And it's interesting when you look at it, because again, this is 24 hours old now. Facilities, Company 2 in Montauk. Staffing, Company 2 at Montauk. Under fire apparatus, the purchase of a new aerial device and place our present ladder in Station 2. Now we're placing ours in Station 4 because obviously he didn't know that there was going to be mid-rises showing up on Washington Avenue. You know, on the next page, training. The town needs to consider a parcel of land where a training facility can be built. We're doing that. This is a 30-year-old document. But at that time, he even identified that we needed more staff. And there was a plan in place to do it.
Now, did this occur during a time of population growth that no longer occurred after a certain point in time?
Well, this was written in 1987.
Yeah. I mean, up to that point, was the town growing in people? Was the school system expanding? Were things happening that...
Yeah, if you trend it back and you look, the town was likely growing, much as it is now. I mean, so again, we're not looking at necessarily the population growing, the nighttime population growing, but the daytime population has grown tremendously.
I think Chief O'Bear was a visionary. He was obviously an instructor and a very learned man, and obviously applied all of his skill and expertise to what the needs of this town should have been in 1987 and moving it forward.
It's an opinion. There might have been other experts that came up with a different opinion than this.
Well, I got to interject here. The part about the Monowese, this person did have visionary, because if you look at the growth over that area of town, which is my area of town, it is dramatically increased with condos and stores, and there's a lot, and I see a lot of activity. This person in that regard definitely was a visionary. There was a lot of land available, and it's all been taken, so it's very interesting. I want to commend you, Chief, for what we're saying here. You've shown us, and since you've been chief, you've given us data, detailed data, which we hadn't really seen. So we appreciate that, and that helps, and it's good for the public to see this, because these are hard numbers, and it's detailed data. You have all this information. We ask you, you present it. So I think this really helps, and people watching this is hard data.
Just something I thought that was interesting as a point of reference is all that was. So the conclusion, looking to plan for the immediate day-to-day needs as well as the future of the town. And I'm just looking to ask a rhetorical question of what is the acceptable level of risk for the community? And that's something we all have to ask ourselves, is when you're calling 911, are you expecting there to be a firefighter there? And how long are
People
you
do.
waiting for?
They do. They, like I said, they expect minutes, not 6 minutes, like quick.
Sure.
At 10.
This was an outstanding presentation, Chief. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Any questions for the chief?
May I?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yes, first of all, everyone on this board has the highest respect for what you do on a daily basis, all your men, and the mission that you try to achieve. It's just, it's remarkable. It's things that we could never do. So, much like the veterans in the military, thank you for your service. Of course, there's always a taxpayer side of things. And Sherman Katz, who is not here today, I'm speaking on behalf of the discriminating taxpayer. A couple items I think that, he would question, and I'm questioning myself here. One is about taking some of the current tasks and duties of the fire department, some of the functions, and actually moving them out of house, which adds to expense. Now, such as the hose testing. Now, I know that you cite that it's nice to shift the liability to a third party, but the hose testing was always something that we performed, and we were willing to accept that liability as part of our operations. And so when you do something like that, it adds to cost. And people like far beyond Mr. Katz would say, is that definitely necessary?
Well, if you look at this past year, it was the first time that we hired an independent company to do it, and we failed that much hose. It shows that we weren't doing it appropriately. We didn't have the right equipment to do it all along anyways.
Right, and the right equipment would have been what?
Well, a lot of it is a matter of the right pumps to pressurize the hose and to monitor the hose. When you're testing hose, you're laying a number of hose out, and you're pressurizing it to a certain pressure, and you're watching it over time. And there's different equipment and instruments needed to do that correctly.
But we had something to try to do that in the past, right? I mean,
Correct.
we were performing that function.
Yeah, and just so that we're talking, it's about a $3,000 to $4,000 expense for this. So it's not while I appreciate it's $3,000 to $4,000, you're not talking a tremendous expense for the amount of hose we have in this department. Sorry?
The equipment or the test?
For the test.
All right, well, that's always going to be in the back of our mind. It's what could we continue to do or try to do, or is this move necessary? And also, with the same respect, the building inspections or the use of consultants. Now, in the current year, our consultant budget, the consultant line in your budget was what?
There was not a line. I think we forecasted a need of like 120, 130, something in that area.
Right, and that's moving from virtually zero to 150,000. Now, the inspections are handled by marshals, is that right?
The inspections are
Fire
handled by
marshals?
somebody who's credentialed to be a marshal. But
Right.
Yeah, right.
And in the department, who is credentialed? Or how many are credentialed?
So there are currently 2 that are
Two.
credentialed to do those types of inspections.
You and one deputy?
Correct.
Yeah. I know that, you could say that the fees are there to cover that. But those fees were always part of the general income of the town already. So that revenue stream is being taken out of the town side and put toward this designated purpose for which you are hiring a third party to do.
Those revenue streams were created in 2016, passed at a public meeting, and during the public meeting, the public actually asked, where are these fees going to go to?
Yeah.
If they're going to go to the fire department, then we support them, quote unquote, was what somebody had said, and it was passed more conditional on the fact that those fees would go back to the fire department.
That's not correct. No money that comes into the town ever goes directly to the department. Everything clears through.
So it may not in terms
Everything
of...
clears through the general fund. It has to.
It
That's
may
state
not
law.
in terms of a behind the scenes, but in terms of one paying for the other, that was the intent.
Oh, the consultant should, yeah.
Right.
He's offset by those dollars.
Sure.
But what the fire department generates in revenue doesn't.
No, I understand the way that math,
I
yeah, what
just want to
financially.
make sure we
it works.
understood.
But just the intent of it is what I'm referring to.
Stacy would be happy as anything downstairs collecting
Sure,
all the
oh,
tax
yeah,
money
of
because
course.
we'll just stay in the tax office then.
But that revenue wasn't coming in prior to 2016, so we can't really say this is revenue that was always put towards the town when it's only a year and a half, 2 years old.
But I think what Michael's talking about, you might be blurring a few things, because there's the consultant that's going out doing normal inspections, which we don't get paid anything for.
Correct.
Town generates nothing for.
But they're inspecting
They're
town
inspecting-
town businesses.
Right.
They're inspecting,
And-
yes,
right.
but the town gets nothing for that. Then there's the permitting fee, where the town generates money. But the town used to do those inspections ourselves. Now, we're not doing those inspections ourselves.
Correct, yeah.
Why did that change then?
Well, part of that is because.
Am I correct? We used to do those inspections ourselves. We didn't use consultants for that.
We did, and what was happening was we didn't then have the staff to go out and do the other inspections. That
Yeah, but
were
you have
occurring
that
down
staff
at
now to do the
businesses.
other inspections.
Right, so what's
You have
also
the
happening.
consultant doing this. Why are we not still doing that?
Well, a lot of it's economic development. Look how much more economic development there's been. And we've had to increase the number of people able to do that. For example, the building department alone had to hire a contractor just to cover the Amazon project in this current year. And we're stuck having to go there just as often as they are. I mean, so part of that is because the level of new building has increased so much in town that with that comes those inspections that need to occur while the building process is taking place.
We're still doing some inspections ourselves. with our
Oh, yeah.
current- Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we can make an argument operationally. If we didn't have Jim doing those inspections, we would be falling behind in compliance with state statutes, and we wouldn't be delivering as much income.
And I think your point was well taken earlier, Mike. There's a liability that the town would have if we did not make those inspections, those fire inspections, and there was an
Yeah, but
issue.
we're talking about, Michael's talking about two different things.
I understand.
Michael Hallahan's talking about
Right.
two
What was
different
my
things.
question? I missed it.
Mike, we understand the consultant that the town hires to do the annual inspections, for lack of, it is considered annual inspections, or every 4 years, whatever it's done. Understand that. Michael's point was, the building inspections, we have consultants doing that, where we used to do it in-house. But the chief says we still do some of that in-house, and it's just being supplemented by the inspector.
Yeah, the other thing we
Did I
didn't do
summarize
was.
what you said correctly?
Yeah, I want to know whether 150 is a number that can somehow be reduced based on the ability, again, of the deputy and possibly certifying someone else to handle some of these inspections.
Sure.
Fair question.
Yeah, so what you're seeing as well is we weren't involved in the plan review process to the extent that we are now, up until 2016. So there is more work than there was. And the reason I say that is the fire department, the town manages its permit process through a program called a view permit. We never had access to that prior to 2016. We never saw the permits that were coming through. So that's all new work. That's not existing work. For whatever reason, the department wasn't
There's always
involved
gonna be
in the
work.
plan review process like we are now up until 2016. So if that answers your question. It is all new work that's being done.
And so that one, I mean, I know there may not be a breakdown of that 150 number, but 150.
Correct.
Well, we'll have further discussions on this with you, I think.
What do you want it broken down
Month
between
ahead.
how much is
We're generating.
generated from permit inspection and how much is generated, or what,
Yeah, well,
not generated, what's the cost for permit inspection and what's
Right,
the cost
yeah,
for?
yeah. I think we have to,
property?
we need to understand the functions, with the cost with the functions. With the-
You know, just break it up into two categories, or not, you don't have to break it into two categories, but the idea is how much of that is for plan review and new construction inspection, and how much is it for just inspections on older properties? Sure. I think that's what he's looking for. He wants to see, am I right?
Yeah, yes. And the, on page 42 of the salary breakdown here of the costs, the labor costs, first of all, is the second deputy in here, or is that paid out of some other funds?
Which are you referring to? The
Page-
unit spreadsheet?
No, sorry, page 42 of the budget, which I don't know if, I don't think you recreated that page with your handouts. But I see you and I see a deputy, and is the second deputy the fire training and bill review officer?
I believe that's how we worded it, yeah. And that was previously funded in the contractual obligations line.
Yep, that's him.
Yeah, that was previously funded in a contractual obligations line, so it's coming over to the fire department line now. It was already funded in the budget.
Oh, okay, I see that. All right. So the firefighter line there, which went from, was going from 28 to 30, that is is that a 15% increase, I think, there? The cost of 2 additional firefighters are now added to the annual firefighter line there. It should be, I think that's just the straight salary line. That should be 140. And so the additional increase in that firefighter line there, it looks like it's an additional 7%. Is that because of multiple years of contract catch-up, or is there something else on that line that I don't understand?
The page on my end.
On 42,
42.
yeah, the firefighter line that went from 1.943 million to 2.241,
Well, it's the addition of 2 firefighters and plus the contractual increases.
right.
Right.
So the salary portion of those 2 firefighters is what? I mean, the average salary of the 1943 ends up being approximately $70,000. The average salary.
Okay.
So if you take the 1943 and you divide it by the 28, it comes to 70,000. Now, if you're adding 2 more of those average salaries to that line for the 2 additional people, that's 140, but you still have an additional $140,000 increase. Is there something is something in my math that's not correct there? Is that 7%?
Just said it was
It's
contractual.
Now you got a 10%.
Increases.
It's a 10% increase.
Yeah, but the wage increases would be what? 2.5%? 2.5%.
But this is like 10.
Is it doubling the 6-month at 140?
Well, the full year is
The
added in.
140 becomes 280 when you, see, the 140 that we have on the 2 firefighters is really for half a year. When you double that to extend it out over a full year, it's 280. Is that part of what Michael's asking, Ed?
No, no. Because, again, if you take the 1,943,000, if that represents 28 firefighters, that's, I believe that's 70,000 per firefighter. Is that about right?
Yeah, about 70,000.
No, I see what you're saying. Yep.
210, you're a couple $100,000.
I just have to check one thing. They may have added in that a 3rd firefighter, the one that was on leave. So I got to just check that number.
Please check the number. Could we check the numbers?
No,
And
no,
that's why I'm asking the questions here.
2.5 plus 140 is
Yeah,
not gonna work.
it's off.
Yeah.
The number's off.
You see, anytime anything goes up over 2.5% on the labor line, an alarm goes off in my head. And I can't get the alarms off. So it's like a 3-alarm fire. Yeah. So, all right, so back to Deputy Chief Marcus. So the billing, the collections on the billing are underwhelming, disappointing at the moment. Where do you see it going? Is it going to catch up soon? Is it ever going to catch up, or is that just the collection percentage of what we can expect down the road? We always wanted that position to be sort of self-funded.
Well, you're right, and that's something that I'm aware of. We have $83,000 outstanding and they have to go to collections right now. And we are in the process of negotiating with the collection provider as of this week. We narrowed it down to 2, and we've got some ongoing negotiations between one of our town attorneys and that. So I think that's the next step, is bringing that to collections. The other thing to keep in mind, and we've also written off $28,000 that were town residents. and/or that were Medicare, Medicaid. Something to keep in mind is that Medicare, Medicaid only allow one bill. So when the transporting ambulance sends a bill, they're not going to then pay our bill as well. Now, we've asked the ambulance provider in the area to work out a contract where we can bill with them so that we're not sending the person a bill as well, that way the person's getting one bill and we would get a fixed amount of, let's say, $300, and the ambulance provider has refused to negotiate that with us.
Not surprising. You know.
Well, the ambulance used to bill for your service.
Correct. At a
So
tenth of what we do now.
Why don't they
At that time, they were billing.
still bill the Medicare then for you?
I don't have an answer for that. All I know is that they've refused to discuss that with us. So there's of the $28,000 that have been written off, there's certainly some money there that could have been recovered if we had a mutual agreement with this. And then there's $83,000 that are there. Then the other thing I don't mind saying either is ambulance response is a commercial business that's profit driven. I think I can say that. And what's happening is we're finding that with the pursuit of the PSA that we're going after, the ambulance provider has really tried to anticipate the fact that we're going to be going for a hearing pretty soon in Hartford, and has flooded more or less North Haven with not necessarily more ambulances, but certainly more paramedics.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing, but then it reflects negatively on this profit. So while you may not see the dollars, there's the added value of knowing that this individual is watching EMS response in this town like a hawk and ensuring that we're getting paramedics as often as possible. So, it's a matter of I can send my firefighters into the hospital with every ALS call, and this number will go way up. But you'll be losing your paramedic that much more often. So there's a balance that I'm going to be looking from the Board of Finance to figure out where that balance is.
So, one of the slides you had, you weren't sure how often ambulance was showing up a paramedic, but it would seem like, at least in the last year, the
definitely
lion's share of the
increased.
time,
Right.
they've been showing up with paramedics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you look at our anticipated call volume, our anticipated number of times that we assisted a hospital is down about 100 this year from where we saw it last year. And that's, again, a lot of because what's happening behind the scenes right now.
Do you have a sense of the legal costs associated with collections?
No, so that's one of the things that we were going back and forth with, was trying to figure out what that cost was. And I want to say that it ranged anywhere from 14 to 22% in collections. And that's one of the things that we're actively negotiating now. Not only the overall percentage, but then what happens when a person gets a collections letter and they're not going to pay? Then does that fee include an attorney and filing for the next steps and so forth? So those are some of the things that we're actively looking at. And we want to be find a Connecticut company, and we want to try to be as friendly as possible with this process.
And we're not sending residents to collection.
That's correct. That's why that $28,000 is a write-off for residents, right?
Rich, when you look at the response from ambulances prior to our initiative to embark on taking the PSA back, we didn't have the paramedic kind of issues at that point. They were not participating in the ambulance that was coming to the scene. Once we began to pursue that, certainly as the chief indicated, then we've seen more activity from the ambulance company with paramedics. Once this whole process takes place, hopefully we end up with the PSA, and then we're able to certainly determine what the specifications are and the time criteria and the personnel that will be responding. So I think right now the ambulance companies are trying their best to put their best foot forward, but my expectation is that is not going to be the case in the near future.
Anything else?
Well, no, regarding that, the paramedic billing here, how, approximately what do you charge when a patient, when a ride-in occurs of a paramedic to the hospital?
So the bill is typically around $800, but it's negotiated down further based on insurance agreements and the presence of Medicare and Medicaid. But the most that we're able to collect is about $800 per patient.
What do we really collect? What's the average after?
Well, the average is
Well,
not much at all.
Blue Cross Blue Shield, when you pay Blue Cross's Blue Shield's rate or when you pay Medicare's rate, what are those
Well, I
numbers?
heard that it's either Medicare or Medicaid
So what's that
is
number?
not honoring that bill at all. Is that right?
That's correct,
Not,
Right.
zero.
0.
So what's Blue Cross's number, at least?
So I can
What's
tell
the
you.
average insurance company's number?
Yep, so out of the 328 trips to the hospital since we began this process, the gross charges were $232,899. After agreements with insurance companies and so forth, that's down to $171,152.
How many calls was that?
328.
Yeah. Now, for a paramedic to go into the, with the ambulance to the hospital, the billing is greater than if the paramedic service just occurred on site. Is that right or no?
No, we don't really charge for paramedic just on site and just doing an assessment. The charge is primarily for riding into the hospital only, assisting to the hospital only.
So we're not riding in unnecessarily in order to
No, and that's
generate some billing.
no, and that's what I'm saying is that this number can be higher if the intent of this board is to say we want to make sure that number is as high as it can get. Well, then even when the AMR provides with the paramedic, we'll keep our paramedic with the person and we'll make money. But that's not the
No,
intent of
that's
the
not what
thing.
we want.
But so that's where I'm saying is that's why this is always going to be a little bit of a moving target in terms of collection, because it's going to depend a lot on what we're sent by the ambulance.
Okay.
Does the patient get two bills then? Or
Yes.
one from AMR and one from...
Correct. Now, if you're Medicare, Medicaid, the intent is you send it to your secondary insurance provider, which a number of people have, and the secondary insurance provider will typically take care of the majority of that bill.
I thought if Medicare didn't cover it, the secondary wouldn't.
I think it depends on what levels you have, what different packages you have.
So we do collect some from Medicare.
If it's a secondary insurance
It's got to be a secondary. Medicare, you're right, won't pay for it. It's a secondary insurance. So we've collected how much so far, Paul?
So the balance is 83,375, I'm sorry, looks like 54,156. There's 83,375 outstanding.
So, okay.
54, is that since the inception of
Correct.
November, so it's over a year ago.
Yes, sir, about
Yeah.
14 months.
14 months.
And there'll be an expense associated with the collection.
Of the remaining 83,
Because
yes.
of the legal.
Yeah.
And your
I'll be able to have that for you definitely soon as we negotiate that.
and your original estimate of annual collections was what when we put this all
I believe it
together?
was 160,
Might have been more, but okay.
but I'm over my buildings. You're only mentioning a shortage, you're not mentioning the overage on the building permit fees. So let's be fair.
But we have a chance of collecting at least 50% net of the outstanding dollars. And the outstanding dollars are what, 120 now? We said?
I thought you said 80.
83.
83. And we've collected so
We
far.
talked about that, so it'd be about 120.
So that's what I'm getting at. So
Yeah.
I think that we could potentially end up at 120 after the collection agencies go into place for those non-residents, which brings the total fees potentially up to 120. And the benefit of the position is, like you mentioned, Paul, keeping AMR, sort of being like a guardian at the gate.
Correct.
And the benefit of the training that he's providing.
Which we haven't even talked about, because
Right.
there's value added there, but there's not a cost.
Scott's done a good job in, I think, both the training and integrating volunteer and paid.
So,
I'll give him that.
so believe me, no one has a greater
Won't give him much
appreciation.
more, though.
No one has a greater appreciation for the numbers than I do, or Ed does. But when we look at this position, there's other residual benefits that, quite frankly, outweigh the dollars that we thought we were going to get.
Yes, sir.
I know you got more. I can
Oh,
see
yeah,
it down
no. Mr. Monaco and I helped, along with you and Scott and Mr. Swinkowski, we tried to study, to analyze all the issues within the fire department to see what resources were necessary in next year and the years to come. And I want to thank you very much for participating in that and assisting us with getting the information that helped to clarify a lot. I wanted to go over some of the points of our study in order to determine whether our efforts were worthwhile and what has been accomplished and what is yet to be accomplished.
Sure.
The first portion, and by the way, I have other copies of the report if anyone else wanted to follow along.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Did you bring a copy yourself
I did
today?
not,
No?
no.
No, well, please
If you have a
give
copy, I'd
staff. Yeah, thank you. Even though the pages are not numbered, I think we're gonna start where the recommendations are on
I know the highlights already. I know the highlights.
Well, good. So, starting with the workshop recommendations here, which is, I think, is on the fourth page. Area number 1 here, it covers AMR and the 2 PSARs that we have here. Of course, the PSA is the primary service area, and the passer is the license, the holder of the designated responder for North Haven, which of course is AMR. And how we decide to handle the whole mix of what calls to take and what to designate to others, that plays into the size of the department that you need and the associated costs. So I know you don't want to comment on everything during these contentious moments with AMR, but it's my belief, by the way, that despite a lot of noise from the Fire Commission, the Fire Commission and you, either by not commenting or by nodding your heads, I think that a lot of what was in this study you found a really agreeable. And certainly the portions here that deal with AMR about the positioning of vehicles, about the possible negotiating in order to guarantee paramedic staffing of their ambulances, of trying to get response data from AMR on a continuous basis, and the idea that AMR would be the return vehicle for any paramedic of the fire department that goes along on a ride-in. These are all, I think, pretty concrete, positive steps to get some efficiencies out of AMR and to increase the quality of their responses. Now, how do you feel about that?
No, you're absolutely right. And if you recall, these initiatives had all started before our mini workshops had started. We've been having discussion with pursuing the PSA now for a number of years, and many of which includes this criteria. So I would expect that a majority of what's here is going to be incorporated depending the outcome of the PSA.
But AMR, the goal is to actually have all parties be part of the solution, to have the union, the fire union to be part of it, to the volunteers, and that's inclusive of anyone we have as a partner in medical and fire response, and that's probably going to be AMR, whether it be through the current setup where they have the passer, or whether we acquire it and subcontract it out.
Sure.
Now, even if if we're unable to get that passer, is it your understanding that they are willing to engage in an additional performance contract in order to release data and to guarantee certain stationing and staffing?
It's my understanding that they will entertain the negotiation of a contract. That is where the discussions came up about the 10-minute response for the ambulances, was during that conversation. And I would expect that there would be performance measures in there that would have, again, this is if we're unsuccessful in obtaining the PSA, the performance measures that we would have in there would have things like if they weren't able to meet some obligation, there would be a financial penalty to that. Quite honestly, I'm not a fan of that, because a financial penalty says nothing for the person who's suffering from that loss or that delayed response or delayed care.
Yeah.
So to me, there's more teeth in having the PSA and treading those deficiencies over time and saying to the contracted provider, listen, you're not able to meet these terms, you're at risk of losing this contract. There's much more at risk.
So they don't respond to fines?
Fines. No, they'll respond to fines. There's other contracts that exist with other municipalities where there's fines.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar company,
Right. Well, Mr. Katz and others just want to know why AMR can't be fixed, why it can't be improved.
It's a great
within
question. So AMR right now,
the way it is now.
Sure. So if you were to obtain the copy of the EMS plan that the town of North Haven has on file with the state of Connecticut as of January 1st, 2018, the EMS plan dictates EMS response within the town of North Haven. AMR has AMR has an obligation to abide by that EMS plan, which is signed by the chief executive officer of the town, and then which they are asked to have input on. I can tell you that that plan that was enacted on January 1st, 2018 has not been followed. So, contract or no contract, there's certainly not a will on their part to meet the obligations we identified in the EMS plan.
But have they been fined? Is there any
There's not
penalties right now?
currently- There's not currently the mechanism to fine them at this time. So
Okay.
that's why we're pursuing the PSA.
Right, and so they could be either in the current format or by subcontracting with a certain provision. There could be a supplementary requirement requiring them to have paramedics on all vehicles? Is that possible?
It's possible.
You see, because this is a major concern of a lot of people in town.
Sure.
Is to have a paramedic on the second and third vehicles that respond, and that's AMR. Yeah, you know, when our rescue is out, it's AMR.
Sure.
Yeah. My question is, what percentage of the incidents right now does AMR respond ahead of our fire department rescue vehicle?
So I don't have that number for you. It's a number that's possible to obtain, but it's going to be a little skewed, only because we don't have direct access to AMR's response times.
Right, because it seems that AMR would be able to get there quicker if they are stationed on the north side of town and the south side of town.
Right, but don't forget that those are regional ambulances. So as the needs of other towns present themselves with 911 calls, those ambulances, because they're pre-positioned in North Haven, does not mean they're obligated to North Haven. So they're responding to all their towns.
But when they're there, they could theoretically, it's a shorter distance, get to the scene faster. And but they also have a larger number of vehicles. So if we're busy, they certainly can get to the scene before we can, if we're busy.
If sometimes you're talking a lot of math now, because like I said, they're not even willing to commit to a 10-minute response time. The fire department's responding in 6 minutes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, not willing to commit and not being there in under 10 minutes are two different things.
Is it true that AMR currently has a paramedic within their vehicle more than 2/3 of the time?
I wouldn't be able to answer that.
No. Okay. All right. Well, that covers AMR for now. Now, the second area of our study here has to do with dispatch, and And, right now, EMD, the emergency medical dispatch, is being performed by AMR at no charge to the town.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, that is what Mr. Monaco refers to as triaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I refer to it as simply like a medical call assessment or a medical call classification. But it's obviously something that has to happen professionally, technically correct, and fast. And dispatch might have this all placed upon them if we decide to expand the dispatch and take EMD in-house. You're saying it's the right move despite the additional costs of $400,000 per year for the town forever.
Correct. It is the responsible manner in which to handle 911 calls is for the town PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point, to be answering its own 911 calls as we do now, and then to be ensuring the appropriate level of response to that residence in need. It was something that as we've let more and more control go of how 911 calls are managed, we've seen it affecting us operationally in terms of not knowing for sure what resources to send, and then in terms of it matter safety as well. So think about it this way, and I know we discussed this during our meetings, but our current dispatcher answers the phone and has to at least get some idea of what's taking place at the scene in order to even know to send police or fire, or to even know, have some idea of what's going on. So let's say they're asking about 6 questions to get to that point. Well, the EMD to call, there's only about another 4 or 5 questions left to ask. Instead, we're answering the call, we're asking the questions so that we can at least assemble a response from police and or fire. And then we're transferring that person.
Right, so it's
on the
2
phone.
sets of evaluations,
So it's
actually.
2 sets of, so it's more frustrating
Or some-
to the caller,
or some
it's
initial
longer
questions.
to the caller, and then once we transfer that call,
Yeah.
we're now relying on a CAD link that
Right.
basically is things being typed in the computer that our staff can see, assuming they're in the vehicle to even see it and they're following it. So there's a
Right, so
safety
you're
component.
saying it's going to improve our response time by maybe as much as 1 minute per call, which is a lot. It's significant, and I think worth a big chunk of money.
In our eyes, it is. This falls under the police department, and I'm sure Chief McLaughlin will have more for you on it. But I fully support the increase of dispatchers to our staff there.
And certainly, the Board of Fire Commission also endorsed that.
Yes.
The $400,000 number came from your subcommittee,
Yes.
based on what your anticipated cost for that would be. And certainly, we are in agreement with that.
Didn't we talk about that, Mike, about the dispatchers? This came up last year.
Yeah,
It's come
it
up a
did.
number of times during budgets.
He asked for a couple.
You're going to see Chief.
He asked for 2, but we need the 4 in order to facilitate the EMD process.
You're going to see
4
Chief-
additional.
You're going to see Chief McLaughlin.
Yeah, when we see his presentation, but I know it came up last year, it's been coming up, so I think that we need to hear that presentation
Yeah. The
to assist with this one.
Right, so thank you. So this Section 2, the Fire Commission mostly agrees with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But part of it, though, of course, is again to screen calls, to try to control our resources and to dispatch them optimally. And also to try to maybe find a way to continue to subcontract out the non-critical queries that come in here. The calls, EMD rates them on an A to E scale, A, B, C, D, E.
Correct.
Right? And A and B are routine or non-critical in nature. But when you get to C, it becomes a certain level of priority.
Correct.
And D and E, at E, it's almost like there's a no response to a victim situation, right? D or E, is that right?
E would be of the highest.
Of the highest, yeah. So paramedics, are they always, they're necessary for C, or is C dependent on what the symptoms are?
Depends on how the call is handled, right? What further questions are asked that force it to be an ALS call or a BLS call.
Yeah. Now, our PSA is overseen by a medical director, and the medical director is affiliated with our sponsor hospital, Yale New Haven. Who is our medical director?
David Cole.
Okay.
For this purpose, for EMD purpose, David Cole.
Yeah. Do you think that we should try to gain further exemptions from our first responder duties in order to try to alleviate some of the stress on our paramedic responses?
Yeah, I don't see there's an opportunity to do that, only because the calls are being EMD'd right now, whether it be by AMR or whether it be by our dispatch. When I say our dispatch, because if our dispatch receives a call and they can right away determine that it sounds like something the fire department shouldn't go to, they'll stay on the line or they'll continue to watch over the next minute how that call is officially EMD'd so they don't send us. So we're already not going.
Yeah, but you have to set up a response plan with the medical director that's approved by him.
Correct.
So you can go and ask for that response plan to change at any time.
Sure, you can. It's not likely he's going to change it when the calls that we're going to are calls that necessitate an emergency response. You think about it, anytime you're turning the lights and sirens on to get to a call, you need the fire department to be going as well. And so in raw terms, lights and sirens on means that it's a priority call. No lights and sirens means that it's not. And in those cases, typically the fire department is not asked to respond because the ambulance can get there when it gets there.
Well, you mentioned before that you want to respond to all EMS calls, which can be medical calls not requiring a paramedic.
Correct.
Now, you also said that most other towns or all other towns respond all the time, and I was my understanding that cities such as New Haven, maybe Bridgeport, and even Hamden have gotten to the point where they've gotten agreements with their medical director in order to limit the amount of calls they respond to.
Sure, cities.
So they depend on AMR, and they have some sort of belief in the performance of AMR to get there, so that there's no duplication, there's no second vehicles racing to a scene that doesn't require, that's not an urgent medical issue.
Sure. It's happening, yeah.
So it is happening.
Sure, if you're going to compare the citizens of North Haven to the citizens of an inner city, but that's what you're asking.
Well, I haven't taken a poll to find out what
but you
all
look
the
at
towns
other suburban towns, and they're responding to medicals just like North Haven.
Yeah.
The same types of calls.
All right.
You know, the theory with that as well in the cities is there's hospitals in the cities, so the ambulance response times are usually much less.
North Branford? What does North Branford respond? The fire department?
North Branford, you can't compare us to only because they transport, so they go to everything.
But who transports? They do it themselves?
They do it themselves, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to the number 3 here, which is the creation of a second paramedic unit. Now, the idea from Mr. Monaco here that he strongly was pushing for was to try to get some paramedic gear on Engine 1. I know that the problem there is that the paramedic may get carried away on a ride-along. Is there, within the number of people you have now, is that something that can work? Or if the paramedic can be returned via AMR, would would that lessen the need for replacement?
You know, we brought this up at a commission meeting that was very well attended by the public, and after hearing how this will work, the public, number of people in the public got up and said they don't want to see the engine staffed with 4 with a paramedic on it drop down to 3. Because they value the fact that we only have so many firefighters able to respond right now to scenes. So by taking one more person now and assigning them as a paramedic role without adding to our staff is only depleting from the number of suppression firefighters you have.
Well,
So
right.
it was something that the commission didn't agree with.
Well, yeah, but the commission also made a statement saying that they didn't want the engine itself used as in medical response. That they didn't want the only pumper in town running around to medical calls.
Well, it's doing that now anyway.
But it's doing that now anyway.
Right.
So that was some false criticism from the
It wasn't only the not having the pumper running around town. Certainly, it would be responding to medical calls.
Yeah.
It would be the loss of the personnel on that apparatus, which is the only water apparatus that we that carries water. So, and as the chief clearly indicated, the residents that were in existence at that commission meeting were adamant about that to make sure, based on the percentile of fire calls that we have in proportion to the medical calls, they wanted to make sure that we had appropriate staffing. And I think that, certainly goes to what the chief's recommendations have been as far as adding additional personnel, which would include additional paramedics not on the, would be able to include it on the pumper at that point if in fact we had a second water source. So, I think having only one water source, and our commission was clear that we did not want to lose one person, a paramedic, off of that, would not be something that our commission would be willing to do.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to look for creative ways in which this could happen.
But it needs to be creative in a way that makes sense from the fire suppression standpoint as well.
Right. Well, we didn't know if the temporary loss of one person on that pumper was worth having a second paramedic response unit within the town with the current structure. That's what Mr. Monaco believed was the better option, and I agree.
Well, I understand that, but you also saw slides that indicated the number of calls, simultaneous calls that are occurring, and you end up with 2 medical calls and then a fire, and now you've got your 2 paramedics that are out, and who do we have to respond to the fire? So it's a balancing act. There's no question. There's no question.
I think, Pat, the point was the engine's making the medical call run anyway.
But we're not going to lose the paramedic. It's an EMT on there.
Is the engine going to leave that scene? If it's an ALS call, is that engine going to leave the scene before an ambulance shows up?
No.
Even if there's a fire call, they're not going to leave.
No, can't.
So as long as the
Can't stop.
ambulance has a
The difference in
paramedic,
response time is only going to be a couple
as long
minutes.
as the ambulance has a paramedic on it,
Yeah, you're playing with a lot of variables here.
it's the first part of the question. As long as the ambulance has a paramedic,
There's
it doesn't impact your fire
So let me ask
suppression.
you this: if you're in the emergency room and a shift change, do you want the nurse who's caring for you out or water and say, "Okay, here's what he's going on. I got to go"? No, that's not what you want. You're talking about paramedic here. You're talking about IVs and heart monitors and so forth that are intricately involved in treating a patient. It's not a matter of, hey, a fire call comes in and a paramedic shows up, all right, we're out of here. There's a patient care process that's got to take place to turn that person over. And then there's a lot of equipment that has to come with us. So it's not as easy on paper as it sounds in application.
The engine was there. It's going to stay there until that's done anyway.
It is, but it's not necessarily
The only question
losing a
is
staff member.
losing the paramedic.
Right. Well, that's not
And
the
as long
only
as we
question.
can
That's the biggest
guarantee
question.
with the transport company that a paramedic is on that unit, that should never happen then.
Should never happen, but it's
As long
likely
as you
it's
can
going to happen.
guarantee through a contract with whoever your carrier is, that they equip their people with paramedic, that should never happen. and now you've just added a paramedic unit to town. Basically no cost.
The only way that you're going to be able to do that is to obtain the PSA and then have that contractual language.
Either you get the PSA and you make it in the contract, or you don't get the PSA, you still negotiate it with the transporter.
If they're willing to do so. I mean, they're not willing.
Show them money, they'll be
They're
willing to
they're
do
not willing.
anything.
They're not willing to commit to a 10-minute response time.
So that's the thing, Rich, you're saying show the money. Well, I think the money is better spent in firefighters that serve those two roles, that have enough staff to combat fire and can serve that role of paramedics. That's what we did this in 2009.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to explore this, but if you only somehow end up with 4 extra firefighters total instead of the 8 you're looking for, can one additional person ride along in some other vehicle or be transported by a utility truck or something in order to form a second paramedic unit?
No, so we're going to continue to add 2 firefighters per shift, drop a firefighter off of the engine that's currently staffed with 4 to 3, and run a second engine on Monowese. So that you add 2 firefighters per shift and you have another paramedic on that engine down at Monowese. That's how it would happen.
You're dropping a man off of the engine,
Correct.
and you're putting him with 2 other men on an engine?
No. Now, this happens in the current structure, or
This would happen.
this would happen
of
with the
2.
With the 2 men that he has right now,
Yeah.
that's his intentions. But you're not gonna let them operate as paramedics on the unit.
On that engine, on the south end, sure I will, because there's 2 engines in town now. And the other engine I can't do it with yet because, as we've talked about, he's a shift commander. He can't have his staff drop down because when he arrives on scene, he's got to have enough people so that the engine can perform as an engine and he can perform the tasks needed to be able to call for resources and manage the scene.
Anything else?
Well, no, we can move to the number 4 here. To hire some 2 firemen paramedics for Monday through Friday daytime only shift. It's based on the creation of a day shift fireman paramedic position. Obviously, I know about the objection here. What is the specific injury or problem with the current union members to having this new position, and how does it affect the existing firefighters today if this position was created?
So it's a change in their working conditions, and their current labor contract identifies a work schedule.
Oh, I know that, but is it a change in their working conditions or only the working conditions of the 2 new people that are hired?
Sure, so it would be predominantly the 2 new people that are hired.
Yeah, so how does it affect the other people's working conditions?
The labor contract is inclusive of all employees.
I
so they're
know
gonna
that.
represent-
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying that the contract doesn't have to be changed or amended or revisited or reopened. So when the claim comes in, it's in violation of the contract. Of course,
what's
it's in
funny
violation of the contract because nothing like this exists. We're trying to get them to be part of the solution.
Nothing like this exists either in a lot of other departments, but we insist in this town that it's going to work. In fact, Southington had daytime staffing up until last year, and they just took the daytime staffing off and put the 2 guys on shift, and they're arguing to hire 2 more firefighters. So when we want to look at comparables, let's look at comparables. But please allow me to run the department the way that I see fit. That's all that I ask.
Paul, do you know what the
Which is fine.
Southington?
Be quiet, please.
Do you know what the issues were in Southington? Why they canceled the program?
Yeah, they're looking at a need throughout every shift at this time.
Hopefully every other department has to go through the same position process as well, so.
Brian, please.
You guys are making a full proposal to the chief on his budget day.
Brian.
And I don't see you treating any other department like this.
The main thing we wanted to get across, I think, and wasn't mentioned in the meeting, was the reason we went for the day shift. We felt it was giving him 2 additional people when the volunteers were at their least likely to respond. Giving 2 more people for suppression. That was the reason behind it. That's what we discussed in that meeting.
Sure, but there's a reason why I showed
But again,
you
it is your department, you can do what you want with
that I
it.
did was it's showing 7 days a week, it's showing, and it's showing there's not a distinguishable 8-hour period of time. There's 14 hour period of time.
And we
Right,
understood,
and
we were just
and
trying to
that's
get
what I think-
across
That's why
our
I was
reasoning.
asking the question about the weekends and the mix, because based on that grid, it's the same. It's not dropping off, because
Awesome.
on the weekend, now we have a lot of activity going on. People are coming into town, so that was good to see
No,
that.
I mean, in reality, and that's what I was just trying to get across, the only reason we picked that time is because we felt, based on what we were told, the volunteers were at their weakest strength during normal working hours, and it made sense. You can't equip an engine with them, but it made sense that you kind of filled a gap. But again, strictly your call.
It is, yeah, and that's where.
It was a suggestion and recommendation. That's what was said when we first presented this. These are based on what information we gathered together, some things that would make sense for you. You can take them or leave them as you see fit. There's information you have that we don't have, but it was reasonable. And I want to make it clear that there was thought behind the time frame. Again, volunteers would be at their weakest point at that time. And the same thing with the paramedic gear on the engine. There's a paramedic on that engine anyway. He's not acting as a paramedic. If he can save a life, why not let him? But I understand your position as well.
Well, so, on the Board of Finance here, one of the most frustrating things we have to deal with is that we have no input on any labor negotiations. So if there's some aspect of a contract we don't like, we still have to deal with the after effects. The 24-hour shifts that you're running here, that was created in the previous contract 4 years ago.
Sure.
Now, how were the shifts constructed before that? How are they? How was the shifting managed before that?
So same number of firefighters per shift, and it was 3 days on, 3 off, 3 nights on, 3 off.
All right, so it was 12 hours and 14 hours?
10-hour days, 14-hour nights.
10-hour days, 14-hour nights.
Correct.
Yeah. At least that seems to correspond sometimes with the volume of calls, although
But it's the same number of staff per shift,
Yeah.
so it's irrelevant. And it's also something worth noting that the 24-hour schedule is something that about 70% of fire departments in the country have gone to for a variety of reasons.
Well, now, your 24-hour shifts, is it 1 day on, 3 days off, or is it 2 days on, 6 days off?
1 day on, 3 off.
1 day on, 3 days off. So that, Mr. Monaco asked this one time.
Let me just...
Is that just how it works, whether they were working 2 24s in a row or a 24 and then 3 days off? So OSHA and other labor regulators don't have a problem with someone who might be eligible for work for 24 hours? Or are there certain ways in which you manage it where you have to manage in rest or sleep time within every shift?
I'm not aware of OSHA having any concerns with it if it's allowed in the large percentage of fire departments.
So the safety of the firemen and the safety of the public are not at risk with a 24-hour shift?
No.
So I don't know what the advantages are, but it seems like the disadvantage is that you need to have extra people sometimes if they've been on continuous duty for 18 hours. You keep sending them out on calls?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so this may be why you need more than one paramedic per shift, is that at some point, you need a paramedic to cover a certain portion of the 24 hours, but then after a while, you would need the second paramedic to more or less take over that task within that shift. Is that right? Is that how it's?
I'm not sure what you're asking, no.
There are 2 to 3 paramedics per shift that are physically there.
Right.
I'm just asking the same question I asked before. If one paramedic was working straight for 12 or 16 hours, and you have 2 paramedics on one shift, can that paramedic shift to just being a fire?
Yeah, for sure, yes.
Yeah,
we can
in a fire
internally
role,
move things around, yeah. And that happens.
So this is why you're sort of a little tight with 11 paramedics in your crew, especially when you're talking about putting a second paramedic unit on duty with the department. Is that right?
We're lighting
I know where you're
overall
going. I know where you're
staff
going now.
numbers is what we're lighting.
Yeah, the number of paramedics limit what you can do in terms of getting a second paramedic.
The number of firefighters right now limit what we can do.
Yeah.
Because again, we have to balance fire suppression with the need for medical response. So if we were to hire additional firefighters, it's not to say that they would all be paramedics or not be paramedics. We have some paramedics that are able to function at capacity. It's a number of bodies that we don't have to change our operations.
Right. So, with this 24-hour shift, it seems like it conforms or it constricts us to the rule of fours, where if we believe that it's necessary to staff one position, maybe even for 8 hours a day or even for 16 hours a day on 2 shifts, we're forced to add 4 employees so that every shift on every day is covered, because there's no provision. If you don't allow weighted day duty, if you don't allow a day shift only position to be created, we have to pay for 4 people, even if we want 1 person on 1 extra shift. And staffing all hours, all days seems like it's an unavoidable and expensive requirement of the 24-hour-a-day shift structure. Is that not a correct observation?
It has nothing to do with a 24-hour working schedule. If we were still in our old schedule, the firefighters are assigned to one of 4 shifts because they're responsible to that officer. They train with that officer. They train with those individuals every day. So the firefighters are assigned to one of 4 divisions, if you will. Regardless of what schedule they are working, they're still assigned to a division. So when you take and you say, all right, well, you're going to have a different work schedule than everybody else, and you're going to work these hours, that person now has no continuity in who they work with every day, who their officer is, in any kind of training or anything else. It completely bucks the entire structure of the department by having people that work a different schedule that aren't accountable to the same officer and the same people every day.
I wish we were back to the old structure, but okay. All right, now regarding, moving on here to number 5 here, the volunteer firefighters. I see that's an area of total agreement. Not only total agreement, a lot of this you've already enacted. Correct. So that's good. The only item here that is still up for some sort of change is to increase the tax deferment benefit to volunteer firefighters to try to give them a little bit more morale, incentive, and reward for their service to the town. Now, when the people on the Fire Commission had no idea how we came up with the $1,750, whether we pulled it out of thin air, let me tell you, it was pulled out of a discussion that we had that included the idea of affordability. But that doesn't mean that number couldn't be higher. I think the Fire Commission member thought it should go up to $3,000. And that's a discussion we can have on the Board of Finance here in the days to come. But it does seem like an important part of the recognition of the job that they do.
You know, Mike, you're exactly correct. Just like in your commission, your chairman can't control individuals as to what they say and how they say it. You know, this is a democracy and a free opportunity to say what you need to say.
You can't control your board?
That's correct. As many of our boards, you know, everyone has their opinion. We recognize, the majority of our commission recognizes the importance of maintaining the cost that's involved. It was proposed, first of all.
No, by the way, I would support a higher number than $1,750.
Well, I think that's
because I think that the 30,000 or so cost of the town, again, is you don't want to lose these whatever volunteers are responding.
Absolutely, and that's why we were fully in agreement with the subcommittee's proposal to increase that. Right. Obviously, one commissioner wanted to increase it significantly. That needed to come back to the first selectman and certainly the Board of Selectmen, and it needed to be a change in policy. And whether or not we in fact could do that is still to be determined. But certainly our commission was fully in agreement with supporting increase in whatever we can do to maintain volunteers, not only town volunteers, but we have a number of volunteers that are out-of-town volunteers.
Right, and that was my next question, is what do we do for them, and how does that,
can't.
what can anything be done?
There's something that would need to be
No,
discussed.
It can't be done. I looked at other options of trying to, reward is maybe the wrong word, but incentivize volunteers, especially ones outside the town, and state statute limits your ability to do that. There's only certain ways you can do things. Other than that, it creates other problems. So some things we do in the private sector cannot be done in the municipal sector.
And First Selectman Mike Fried and I and Len Fasano and David Iacarino met recently to look at some different options to try to improve that on behalf of the entire state.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in active discussions on this, you know. We're looking, we met with the volunteers, we've had a great discussion. We reviewed the volunteer fire pension, of which I am the CEO of as the plan administrator. So this is something that we're going to get done. We just don't know how it's going to get done yet because it involves the changing of state statutes. But it will get done, and there will be an increase for the volunteers.
We appreciate your effort, Mike, and Len Fasano's and Dave Iacarino in embarking on that initiative. I think that it'll be beneficial on a state level. There's no question about it. There are a lot of very dedicated volunteers that donate a significant amount of their personal time to the town of North Haven just because they want to be a volunteer. And I think it came up earlier, how many volunteers are actually hired as full-time firefighters. I mean, that's their ultimate goal. Many of these young folks, that's their ultimate goal. And as a matter of fact, Tuesday night we hired one of our own volunteer firefighters as a full-time paramedic firefighter. So, we're excited and thrilled to do that to help a young person begin their career. But I think, something on a state level would be absolutely significant for those persons.
And if a bill gets written, then we have the added leverage of my involvement with this Connecticut Conference of Municipalities to get 169 cities and towns behind it. Got to understand, folks, yours truly is the fiduciary, along with Ed and some of the pensions, on all these pension plans. So we take this very seriously.
Yeah. So, okay, then going along here to number 6 here, the vehicles and equipment. Again, it seems to be something that the Fire Commission mostly agreed with, except maybe for certainly the amount for the PPE gear line was inadequate. That was a misunderstanding on the amount of cost it would be per firefighter to outfit 5 or so per year. So, but it's nice to know that, again, most of the items, the issues within this are being addressed. My only question had to do with on the ladder truck. Actually, it had to do more with the one that's being leased now. Do some ladder trucks actually come with a pumping ability, a pump in a small tank?
Yes.
But our ladder trucks do not have that.
Correct.
Was that something that was ever explored or considered?
It is, yeah. Our truck carries all the rescue equipment as well. So when you start looking at the large amount of rescue equipment that needs to be carried, there's not enough weight to do both, to carry the water, to carry the pump, and to carry all the rescue equipment. We have what some departments almost call a truscue. There's some departments that roll a heavy-duty rescue, which look like a large camper, if you will.
I like those.
That has all the rescue equipment on it. We don't have one of those, and we don't have the ability to make sure it gets out for every single call that it would need to get out for. So our truck kind of doubles as both apparatus.
Have you considered a tanker truck at all?
There's no need for a tanker truck in this town.
No.
A tanker truck to haul water to an engine?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if the east side of town, which does not have a much, I think, complete city water, if that
Yeah, correct. So
is necessary out there?
So, you have towns that carry tanker trucks, or have tanker trucks, and we're fortunate that about 94% of our town has hydrants. So the small percentage of town that doesn't have hydrants, should we need a tanker truck, we call for one from a surrounding town. We have enough water on scene to make an initial attack. With the engines we have, it's the longer term, we need to call a tanker from another town. But it wouldn't have the use here that would justify.
Okay, all right. And
He'll use the other pumpers to haul water too if he needs to.
I hope that any new fire apparatus has complete rust proofing underneath. Was there is it unusual for a truck to rust away the way that our ladder truck did?
So I'm operating off nothing factual here, which I don't like doing. It's not in me. But from what I understand, they're having a hard time even keeping DOT trucks on the road right now for any period of length of time because of the road treatment that's being used in the roads, because it's what it's causing to the undercarriage of the vehicles. So with those conversations I've had in mind with various other people, I don't think that it's uncommon for that. I will have you know that as 3 years ago, during our preventive maintenance of these trucks, I've started to add it's about a $400 to $500 expense per engine. We've started to coat the undercarriage of the apparatus every year with a environmentally safe product that protects the undercarriage from any kind of rot or rust from the winter roads. That's an annual application that needs to be added, though.
Got to use environmentally unsafe. It'll work better.
Some would argue it would work better, right? Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if the undercarriage should be rinsed off or washed more often. I mean, I don't. But my question is that going to happen with all our trucks?
So we're again adding that spray to the undercarriage as recently as 2-3 years ago is something that I hope is going to continue to prolong the lives of these trucks.
Okay, and we're going through a process now of purchasing a new fire truck, new pumper. Again, just to clarify what happened with the current engine one that had the major breakdowns here. The same question comes up, though. How could any piece of fire apparatus not perform on a regular basis according to its designated purpose? How could the stress and strain of responding to fires cause the engine to fail twice?
You're talking about the current engine?
The current engine one.
So the current engine, if you remember, was purchased as an emergency purchase. It was a demo that was available, and it's like buying a demo car. You get it at a discounted rate because it was used as a demo, and it wasn't spec'd out necessarily for the needs of the town or for the frequency of calls that it does.
Yeah, but you're trusting the manufacturer, and they've certainly backed themselves up with the warranty repairs.
Sure.
But even demo or not, how could any engine be designed? How could any spec be inadequate for its design purpose?
It depends on the use. So a lot of towns will have an engine that doesn't go out very much. It goes out
still
once,
a number
twice
of hours,
a day.
though. I mean,
that's not the case in North Haven, particularly with the engine at headquarters. It's out all day long, all night long. So it has a heavy use. So
Yeah.
the engine, so let's just be clear. When I say engine, it can't be confused with the engine that actually is the motor of the apparatus. So when I say engine, I'm referring to the apparatus as known entirely as an engine. But what we're referring to now is the motor inside of it is perhaps undersized, which is why we're having a tough time keeping it on the road. It's overheating. You hear the fans kicking in a lot. It makes a lot of alarms and noises and so forth. So it's something that the next engine that we buy will be specified specifically for the use and for the purpose of North Haven, so we don't have this issue.
Yeah, it still doesn't make sense to me. All right, under the number 7 item here, the mutual aid, I think, once again, that's something that the commission mostly agrees with here. Just engaging in these mutual aid agreements for backup paramedic service. And the expansion, I think, of the agreement with, or the greater utilization of the one with Wallingford, to try to put a little less stress on Hampton. Although I know that some of those are based on the geographic location of a given incident. With regard to the number of people that you might have on staff or add to your staff this year, if just because the townspeople have to make a decision about how much to add to the department in terms of personnel and associated costs. They want the paramedic service to improve, although you've made a great case for the need to improve fire response. If you just get the 2 people, though, right now you're putting them on one given shift for once every 4 days, or are you going to put one on for 2 shifts and have a 1-person increase for 24 hours for 2 out of every 4 days?
The 2 will be assigned to the same shift, and we'll run 1 shift with 2 engines. The remaining 3 shifts will still have 1 engine.
So I'm trying to determine how you're pairing up those people with a piece of apparatus. You said with 2 engines, so you can...
He's going to put the 2 men and take a man off engine 1 on the main station at Montawees on another engine with paramedic care.
Right, so you can run 2 engines with 3 each as long as there's 1 commander within those 6.
Correct.
Right, because the reason why you need 4 on your engine now is because you need an incident commander.
Correct. Initial incident commander.
Yeah, with you. So that's your, okay. So you can run a 2nd pumper and downgrade, change engine 1 to 3 if there's a 2nd engine going out with an additional 3.
Correct.
Okay, well that's important for us to know.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, he said that before I asked him that.
Yeah.
Coming close?
Well, keep in mind that right now we only have 1 water source, 1 engine with water source. So now, by doing what the chief is proposing, we're going to have 2 water sources. So, and again, looking at, unfortunately, the lack of response from volunteers, we're going to be assured to have 2 pumpers that would be available at least for 25% of the time.
Okay. All right, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Yes, I'm very close here. Very close. First, I want to give a message to our friends over in the Fire Commission here, because there's been a little difficulty in maybe their understanding of the Board of Finance's role in within the charter, within the government here. You know, we set our budgets to ensure, I'm trying to make this clear to everyone, so please pass this along here. We set our budgets to ensure that all departments have the resources they need to fulfill their objectives without undue taxation to the town's citizens and businesses. Now, we critically evaluate every department, not just the fire department, and every major line item within the budget. Now, if any department came before us to request a 25% increase in personnel, you can bet that there's going to be a study group that is going to be formed to analyze the labor-related issue. And, we cannot automatically accept the growing vision of any department without thorough examination. So, again, I know the fire department feels like they've been picked on, but this would happen regardless of what department this request came from. So I think it would serve the commission well to appreciate the results performed by Mr. Monaco and myself, and to treat all alternative perspectives as a welcome example of critical analysis that sometimes is missing from what I see on TV. Lastly here, that's my message to the commission.
Let me just take lastly. You got the last.
No, we got to get to last.
I just need to take a moment here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think you have a right to respond.
I appreciate that. I clearly indicated to Mike Frieda and in publicly that I certainly feel that the subcommittee's recommendations and the Board of Fire Commissioners' response was very positive for the town and for discussion purposes. As you clearly indicated, we were very much in support
I'm telling you,
of a large
you agreed with a good, I'd say at least 75% of
a
what was in
large
that report.
majority of your subcommittee's report we were in agreement with. What I think our commission and myself personally took offense to was the subcommittee and/or recommendations to our chief or to change policy and procedure. We truly believe that we have 55 years of senior management skill and expertise on the fire department that understands how to operate a fire department. And as I said earlier, you have a daunting task as a board of fire, as a board of finance, to allocate the monies appropriately and to really scrutinize what the request is. But the truth of the matter is, our commission truly believes that the chief has the greatest skill and expertise as to where the personnel and apparatus needs to be stationed and operationally. So, I appreciate extremely, and wholeheartedly the effort that you and Mr. Monaco and Ed Swinkowski and the chief and Scott Martis put forth in that initiative. And I think it translated into a very positive document. And I think this discussion is positive. And as I said before, Mike, there's no way that we're going to be able to control what some of our commissioners say at any time of a commission meeting. But the truth of the matter is, after all is said and done, I think this was a good exercise to go through, and we absolutely understand the fiduciary responsibility of your commission. Right. But we also want you to understand what our responsibilities are as elected fire commissioners as well.
Okay. In watching the meeting, I wasn't feeling the love. The love was not there.
I think there was no love there for certain aspects of the proposal. I think 75% of the proposal, there was a great deal of love.
Yeah, well, okay. I wasn't stressed.
It's tough love, Mike.
It's tough love.
Are we square?
The last thought I want to leave us with here today is that it's always uncomfortable for this board, if I may speak on behalf of the board, to appropriate a long-term expense to the town of $1 million or more. But I do see the need for most, if not all of it. And I'm going to be advocating for a separate public approval of this via a second referendum question that would piggyback onto the budget vote. We don't want our budget to be strictly decided based on this large new request. But I believe the chief has said here before, let the public decide. So that seems to make sense to me, and that's what I'll be pushing for.
We appreciate that.
That's it.
Finally.
Was that a good way to end?
It was a good way to end. Again, and we've had those discussions.
Okay, let's go.
No, not end this completely. Yes, that's it. Turn this off. We hope you really do understand that any department that comes to us and asks for a 50% increase in staffing on the shifts, and something that eventually, if it's 2 years, 4 years from now, is going to basically translate into a mill increase, that we're going to dig deep and we're going to burrow and we're going to make you justify your position.
Sure.
And there's no animosity in it, but it is our responsibility. If you can prove it to us, we can prove it to the public. If you can't prove it to us, then we can't support it. But we have to dig deep, and we have to sometimes shine a light as much as we can on your positions so the justification is clear to anyone that's looking at it. Having said that, is there anything else for the chief?
I think
Thank you very much,
his
Chief.
justification is clear. His justification is clear to me.
For 14, 16 men?
For additional men, some men.
Don't draw conclusions yet. We have a lot of more departments to talk to.
And women,
Of course.
I'm supposed to say.
We have a lot more departments. Anything else, though, for the chief? Mr.
I just
McCuskey?
want to comment, say one thing. Mike had asked about the change in fire personnel. It should increase by 7.5% plus the 2 firefighters. The 19 numbers do not include 2 years' worth of increases because it was in contractual obligation.
Okay, that was my question.
Due to the timing
Yeah.
of when we set up the contract.
That was, that was my
So it works out.
guess. That was my guess about that, yes.
Right. Other than that, we're good. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
guys.
Thank you.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.